In the sweltering heat of a late summer afternoon, the air was thick with anticipation. The screech of tires interrupted the tranquility of a small southern town. Two police cars, blue lights flashing ominously, cornered an old, battered pickup truck. The scene unfolded quickly on a stretch of the road leading to nowhere but memory. Inside the truck sat Elijah Johnson, a black man with weary eyes, his hands resting calmly on the faded steering wheel. He was just a few miles shy of home, the place where he'd grown up, molded into a man, served his country, and then disappeared into the ranks of the decorated and forgotten. But today, from behind the wheel, all that mattered was the present, a combat zone of a different kind. The officers approached with that kind of cautious aggression only confidence and authority can afford. Their uniformity was striking. Both wore mirrored sunglasses that obscured their eyes, rendering their expressions unreadable as they addressed Elijah with the calculated certainty of a routine stop. "License and registration," Officer Callahan barked, his southern drawl thick as honey, yet devoid of any sweetness. Elijah, seasoned by the battlefield and the boardroom alike, understood the unwritten rules of engagement here. He moved deliberately, warily, but with the respect for protocol ingrained in him from years of military service. "Just reaching for my documents, officer," he spoke evenly, a voice devoid of fear but not unfamiliar with it. As Elijah handed over his paperwork, Officer Reynolds leaned closer to the window, as if closer proximity could divulge invisible transgressions. The street began to draw the curious, a mother pulling her child up onto her hip, a shop owner watching through a glass pane with an old wooden sign signifying the faded southern charm hanging in silence above the doorway. Their gazes clung to the scene unfolding. It was a thriller taking place on their doorstep. "Where you headed, sir?" Callahan demanded, not bothering to hide an edge of suspicion. "Just got back from overseas visiting family," Elijah replied. His voice held that certain brevity frequent travelers knew, those accustomed to border patrols and checkpoints, the same voice that dealt with what was perceived rather than what was. "What are you carrying in your vehicle?" Officer Reynolds asked, eyes narrowing. "Only what's left of this old life," Elijah said, a smile ghosting the corners of his lips, gesturing to a pile of mostly memories, old books, family pictures. In that moment, he was more than his papers, more than the truck they saw and the color of his skin. They were staring at history wrapped in flesh. But all they could see was a potential threat. Officer Callahan returned from the patrol car, dragging along with him the weight of whatever judgment he had decided upon. "Step out of the vehicle." The words, crisp and practiced, left no room for negotiation or delay. But it wasn't the command itself that hung heavy. It's what those words insinuated for someone like Elijah, someone whose childhood playground had the same landmarks as this stretch of road. The folks gathered at the periphery shifted restlessly. Whispers passed between them. "Ain't that," one began, trying to place him, the face not entirely new to this utterly unchanged town. Elijah's footsteps resonated with defiant calm upon the tar, as if each step was a pledge to some story deeper than the surface of this street. He knew this scene was larger than him now, a playground for tensions long simmered. As awareness spread through the onlookers like a sparked wire, the realization set in this was more than an ordinary traffic stop. "You sure about this?" Officer Reynolds asked Callahan under his breath, a sliver of doubt piercing his authoritative veneer. "It's standard procedure," Callahan shot back, anger flickering in his eyes, a flare betraying his own uncertainty. At that moment, no later-day rhetoric or embellishment could eclipse the truth standing under the sun's unforgiving glare. Elijah, caught in this silent standoff, represented everything hidden under the town's genteel surface, the weight of history, of service untold, the camouflage of respectability lifted. As he stood there, confronting this intersection of past and prejudice, there was no flashy uniform to arm him, no polished metal to shield, yet slowly awareness flooded those around, the war hero they heard of, the narratives whispered from father to child, was standing between them and a badge of injustice. But in a system so eagerly black and white, the grays had come fighting back. It was then that the dissembled voice of a young girl watching from the steps of a weather-beaten veranda echoed, "Mama, is he a bad man?" The child's innocence cut through the air, forcing society to glance at itself. For a second, the world breathed in hesitation. A second was all Elijah needed to recall how battles are sometimes fought with a single breath. And so, in the heart of that small southern town, shadows of power, prejudice, and perseverance began to coalesce into a narrative that would ripple far beyond its boundaries. Eyes wide open, this was the beginning. A simple traffic stop turned unfathomable crossroads in the annals of bias and bravery. The wind carried the remnants of that afternoon like a whisper, a story in the making. Elijah Johnson was a name carved in quiet dignity, known to those who remembered. He had left the town a hopeful youth and returned a man hardened not just by wars overseas, but by battles he had never anticipated fighting at home. His eyes still bore the gleam of past triumphs, but now were shadowed by the intricate patterns of life's harsh realities, a tapestry of honor, service, and overlooked valor. Growing up, Elijah's life reverberated with memories of sturdy wooden porches, joyous community gatherings, and evenings spent listening to the elders' tales under the sprawling oak tree. His family, well established in the area, had roots deep enough to weather storms, but none knew the growing storm he'd face upon his return. He had been a star student, the pride of Briarwood High, where ambitions soared beyond the cautious constraints of small-town expectation. He propelled himself from dusty fields to military parades, where he earned his stripes fighting battles that others only read about in the papers. Those experiences crafted him into more than a soldier. They molded him into a beacon of resilience and resolve. After he returned, the humble Shelby pickup he drove, worn but reliable, became a metaphor for what he represented. Time-weathered, unassuming, yet full of untold story. This small town, cradled in the embrace of Southern charm and sap history, held a narrative of its own, one that occasionally suffocated under its rigid self-perceptions. Seen through the windshield as he rolled past familiar sights, the multi-layered dichotomy of past and present was palpable in every corner. An old friend's gas station, now shuttered. The bakery, whose scent once danced through the streets, now a vague memory. Elijah had never anticipated returning to this place, where memories collided with current contrasts. In quieter times, certain spaces still held the echoes of his youth, the rustling laughter tapering off into whispers, the silent glances exchanged in the local diner's rear booths. Yet how much of that town remembered him now came into question. Time and absence are cruel dividers, often dulling the vivid colors etched in collective consciousness to mere monochromatic outlines. Miss Thompson, the elderly librarian whose words of wisdom remained etched in his mind, had once said, "Places don't change, Elijah, but people do. Remember, to some, you're still that kid from the playground." Returning had been bittersweet. There was recognition mingled with rejections, unspoken, seen in glances quickly averted, the shift of eyes that refused to linger. Though his service was acknowledged in hushed tones behind closed doors, the medals and stories bore no significant weight on the streets, where preconceived notions often drowned out truth. In the shadows of casual forgetfulness, the question persisted: to what extent does one's service cloak their skin? Stepping out of his truck that fateful afternoon, Elijah had known full well what lay before him, the confusion, the judgments made at first glance. Yet, for a man who had faced enemy lines, there was a tempered stoicism to stepping onto the battlefield of prejudice. Today, the role required was not just that of a scorned veteran, but a leader, unyielding, steadfast. As the wind brushed through sparse trees lining those back roads, voices gathered, a witness choir. His bearing and character stood unwavering, though inside, his heart beat a solemn rhythm underscored by past belief in community, a faith, if not entirely shattered, then at the very least tested. He found himself reflecting on his return with each questioning glare thrown his way. Would they see him? Would they stand beside him? How do the battle lines redefine amid unfamiliarity wrapped in familiarity's cloth? Assumptions filled gaps that curiosity ought to have conquered. The realization solidified here he must fight to be known again. Under the scrutiny of those who chose to forget, Elijah wore a stoic shell, shaped through years of quiet endurance and externally imposed dismissals. Straddling a history written by courage and a present clouded in doubt, the driving wheel of that old truck was the simplest threshold. Beyond it lay a depth, unrecognized but undeniably there. Moments froze like relics as the air settled heavy with unsaid words and paused breath. This gathering was both a scene and a story, captured not just in the recesses of his mind, but briefly in the undulating ripples of the town's collective memory. A flash forward where presence faced erasure and history faced denial. He remembered his father's soft-spoken optimism and his mother's unwavering strength mingled with pride. Their encouragement was not forgotten. They had always taught him the power of standing still, yet speaking volumes. Here, where eyes met his in curiosity and others in judgment, a silent promise was made to echo this resolve, a promise to stand tall beneath the sun's scrutinizing gaze. And so, amid this slice of life, bookmarked by reflective glances, Elijah Johnson readied himself for the unquenchable need for identity, a clarity beyond color, but layered within it a declaration of existence neither time nor prejudice could erode. Inhabiting a silent war between past valor and present validation, Elijah awaited acceptance that must elicit more than acknowledgement. It demanded recognition. As the storied breeze carried away whispered shards of truth, Elijah braced for revelations yet unspoken, knowing full well battles of the heart fought hardest beneath friendly but scrutinizing eaves. The story of Elijah Johnson, a decorated war hero pulled over on a sleepy roadside, spread through the town like the slow creep of dusk. Elijah's family name, once respected and revered, found itself suddenly vying for its place among those who knew little of the past but weighed heavily on the present. The notion of legacy in Briarwood was sacrosanct, and the Johnsons had once occupied space at its heart. Elijah's father, Charles Johnson, had been a pillar of the community, a man remembered for his steadfast devotion to justice and equality, for how he had held the line in countless struggles during the civil rights movements of the 60s. To many, Charles had been the lighthouse in stormy seas, a man who forged paths where none existed. The Johnsons' home had been an epicenter of dialogue, a place where the community gathered to discuss matters of heart and future, poised steadfast against the tides of change and the rugged canvas of history. It was in the comforting shadow of such giants that Elijah had grown, imbibing their aspirations, absorbing their tales of endurance. His mother's determination had matched his father's strength. He taught him to hold his head high, instilling the notion that dignity wasn't granted by others, but claimed through one's actions and unyielding faith in self-worth. Yet, what Elijah faced now was not the inherited respect due to the deeds of his father, but a harsh reminder that legacy was a title, eroded by societal amnesia. The actions of two police officers had managed to cast a shadow over years of unblemished history, dredging up questions unuttered aloud, but ever present among the minds of onlookers. Where does society truly place value, and how deep does respect run when tested by bias? Community whispers grew louder, a cacophony of conflicting tales and fractured truths. As stories of Elijah's encounter at the roadside circulated, they came unwound and mended into something almost mythic-like tales of a phantom knight caught in a trap laid by villagers. In the days following the incident, local gatherings at Briarwood's places of worship and its small-town diners buzzed with tales, highlighted by speculation and concern. The nostalgia of an era that once held the Johnson family in esteem despaired against newer, harsher chords of distrust echoing through the town's broken tapestries. Some defended Elijah, their loyalty woven from years of camaraderie and shared history. "He's one of us," someone declared in a pitched discussion at the local cafe, their voice churning through the murmur like a stone skipping over calm waters. Others challenged this view, apprehensive and hiding behind the shield of prejudice. "We don't know him anymore," they countered, choosing fracture over fraternity. The community found itself split in silent standoff, struggling between honoring past loyalty and succumbing to fear spun from a veil of ignorance. It seemed as if everyone had forgotten that Elijah had returned, not a stranger, but the same soul who departed years ago in pursuit of glory, carrying with him the roots of his family's enduring spirit. For Elijah, the hardest part was bearing witness to this unraveling. His heritage had been his shield, yet now it felt curiously flimsy, a flimsy buffer against unspoken animosity. The sense of being judged not by the fabric of his character, but by the superficial hue of skin nagged at him, a constant whisper of societal imbalance. Every morning, stepping onto his porch seemed an invocation of memory, a bridge not just to childhood but to a foundation laid by those who came before him. His father always said legacy was like a tree deeply rooted, its branches sheltering future generations, but it could wither if forgotten. In the days that followed, he took solace by visiting the Briarwood Cemetery, where the inscriptions on weather-worn headstones read like excerpts from the town's unrecorded history. Elijah would sit there quietly, in communion with the past, an effort to solidify his place in a life narrative that seemed to drift out of focus. The powers that questioned Elijah were not just of authority, but of a public memory cushioned in comfort and corrosive bias. Even as he felt the weight of unseen judgments, Elijah knew that to seek justice for his legacy, he must move beyond the constraints of memory and tradition, a journey delicate and brutish in its demand. And like those before him, he knew the path, quiet yet resolute, weaving integrity amid unstinting truths. This was both the inheritance of his birthright and the grace he sought with each passing day, knowing full well that the legacy tarnished by bias and oversight could be polished anew by his perseverance. Elijah's legacy was not just a familial footprint in the dusty southern roads, but the promise of redemption, a path unfolded for those who dared to walk alongside history without falling prey to its shadows. As the weight of scrutiny settled, he picked up the test of time, determined that what was built by his forebears in defiance of discouragement would stand, unequivocally, for the generations yet to come. The din of conversation echoed through the old courthouse, its wooden panels whispering stories of judgments past, as the town convened for the hearing that had gripped Briarwood's attention. The space brimmed with anticipation and a tangible tension, much like a theater before a much-anticipated opening act. This was no mere assemblage of facts and figures or a mundane town dispute. This was the arena where societal undercurrents were to be laid bare. Elijah sat in quiet composure, his presence commanding the room's attention without utterance. The courtroom's ambient hush spoke volumes, each observer aware that today wasn't just about one man's fight, but an examination of the beliefs held by many. For Elijah, it was a crossroad, an opportunity to reclaim his place within the community, while simultaneously redefining what it meant to belong, irrespective of color or title. In the clerk's opening words, "We are here to examine the actions of officers Callahan and Reynolds." The trial was set. The community heaved collectively, much like a single held breath. As details of the traffic stop began to emerge, a simple trip, truthful disclosures met with suspicion. The narrative took on a life of its own, colored by the perceptions and prejudices of those involved. Officer Callahan, seated stiffly at the defendant's table, maintained a facet molded in staunch denial. "We were following protocol," he insisted, his voice a cadence marked by practiced neutrality that did little to disguise the underlying unease. Though clearly entrenched in his beliefs, tension betrayed his stoic demeanor, a crack in his steely visage hinting at undercurrents of doubt. Officer Reynolds, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably alongside Callahan. His eyes avoided the audience and lingered instead on the pattern of the floorboards, a reflection of the internal discord that had begun its subtle churn. Here sat a man at a moral juncture, caught between camaraderie with his partner and the dawning realization of a truth he could no longer ignore. His conscience, a dormant presence until now, gnawed at him discreetly. Elijah's turn came, and his voice, steady and unwavering, broke the court's anticipatory silence. "I served this country with honor and dedication," Elijah began, recounting his years of service with a dignity that seemed to echo the banners under which he'd once stood. "I've worn my skin in every place imaginable, in jungles, in deserts, but it was only here, at home, that its color raised suspicion." The room listened, riveted by a narrative that had transformed from personal recount into universal call to action. The struggle of soldiers, unappreciated, communities unwelcoming, and people judged not by their character, but the color of their skin. Elijah's story was seeping from the boundaries of one man's experience to envelop everyone present. If the courtroom had previously been decided by the heavy burden of precedence and routine, Elijah's plea initiated a shift, a subtle yet seismic reconfiguration of thought and empathy. Human faces, tight with assumed perceptions, began to relax, recognizing an injustice basked beneath the veneer of routine due process. The community's voices didn't just rest quietly in that courtroom, they flourished. Old and young alike began to murmur in support, filling the air with acknowledgement that finally sought equal ground under the shadowed arches of witness stands and jury seats. Their chains of ignorance were not broken but threatened, susceptible to the inevitability of change. As the session progressed, the escalating demand for transparency from the community elevated the discussion from minor grievance to an ode of seeking hard-earned truth, sincere resolutions carved from new understandings. Elected officials listened intently. Their responsibility transcended the practical into the profound. The prosecution pressed on, moments converted into critical cross-examinations, asking each officer to explain and justify. The contrast between rehearsed rhetoric and raw sincerity threatened to spread through the ranks of authority like a cresting wave, poised to spill over into public consciousness. Through it all, every nod in the room, every affirmation of Elijah's unjust treatment swelled with a clearness transcending fleeting murmurs. The truth was crystallized into a potent clarity, the unmistaken mark of authenticity, unable to be dismissed quietly or recited again to whispers. Amid the fervor, Officer Reynolds's voice cut through, an unexpected confession born not from guilt, but the pursuit of reconciliation with his own humanity. Protocol was followed, but perhaps not in the wisdom of discourse, he admitted softly, divergence splitting his resolve. Acknowledgement didn't spell immediate solace, but created ripples that would undulate deeper than one simple phrase. The day closed, not with finality, but with an open-ended promise of truth-seeking in progress. As people filed out of the courtroom, the essence of a community beginning to assess and reflect followed suit. Legal evaluations had been set in motion, pivotal examinations that promised more than paper-thin resolutions aiming toward systemic clarity, no longer shrouded by antiquated biases. Elijah, stepping out into the broad afternoon sun, felt the day's warmth nestle against the resolute serenity etched across his features. The gathering was an embodiment of potential rather than past discord, a step courageous enough to unsettle comfort and rewrite long-standing silent rules. This was not merely an emergence, but a pronounced dialogue forging ahead, blazing a trail for others that stretched far beyond familiar city limits. As Elijah faced his town stage, unfamiliar yet akin to a scene transformed by new understanding, he knew the lasting legacy would not simply dwell in historical echoes, but in actions redefined, a testament to shared humanity. And so, a soldier without a uniform found his modern battleground, a narrative not dictated by any single truth, but in the transcendence of collective recognition and cherished values untapped. In the swirl of all that transpired, a solitary figure had remained quiet, an observer hidden within the folds of the courtroom's drama. Karen Turner, a dedicated local journalist with a knack for seeing beyond the surface, watched Elijah's story unfold with a growing sense of urgency. To her, this was more than just another story. It was a moment teetering on the brink of profound transformation, Karen had spent years immersed in the town's cultural and social fabric, capturing its rhythms and reshaping them into narratives that resonated far beyond Briarwood's borders. Her camera was always at the ready, an extension of herself, capturing not just images but the essence living in between the lines of day-to-day anonymity. Her instinct reel had homed in on Elijah's case not merely as an issue of racial profiling, but as a clarion call for justice and a challenge to the inertia of complacency. Karen had copiously documented the proceedings, from the terse formalities to the vibrant, sometimes volatile exchanges that characterized Elijah's hearing. Phrases bounced and reverberated in her mind, their cadence growing persuasive. His voice had been clear, a soldier's tale of honor beset by the disheartening riddle of identity, challenged on home soil. Elijah's words had unlocked a vault within her, prompting her to explore farther and deeper than the typical column lines could. Outside the courthouse, Karen approached Elijah with cautious resolve, not as a reporter seeking a rich tidbit, but as someone confronting a responsibility. Her presence was one of deliberate cogency, a reflection of her role that, while routine, recognized the weight of speaking for those often silenced. "Elijah Johnson," she began, pulling him from a contemplative reverie as he lingered outside under the waning afternoon sun. "I think the world needs to hear your story, your full story." Elijah turned to face her, his eyes instinctively guarded yet transparent with earnesty born from frank discourse. "You think they'll listen?" His question hung in the air, weighted with skepticism, tested by years of racial undertones. Karen nodded. "I do, but more than that, they need to hear it. They need to see you as more than just a headline in a routine traffic stop. I want to help tell that story." The town's pace ebbed and flowed around them as Karen spoke, its usual cadence now punctuated by moments hanging heavy with potential change. Her promise wasn't just about sharing facts. It was a vow to delve deeply into an uncharted tapestry of one man's life, replete with challenges, resilience, and a broader reflection on society's shortcomings. "I'd like that," Elijah finally answered, his voice a measured calm against the backdrop of rustling leaves and distant chatter, signaling new bridges being built. "We might not change everything," he continued, "but we can open eyes, start with what we know." As they stood there, reaching a silent pact, Karen's notions began spinning into possibilities. A feature, a series perhaps, unfurled within her mind. It was more than a narrative of events. It was a fusion of storytelling exploring Elijah's allegiance to his land, respectful of his past battles yet firmly situated in the now. An appraisal not just of an individual, but of a nation's reflection at the crossroads. Together, they mapped out a chronology of Elijah's journey. Karen had visions of tracing his childhood footsteps, capturing seminal moments that had forged his identity, from the lingering scent of cinnamon at the Old Mill Bakery, now shivered into ghostly echoes, to the poignant legacy of family gatherings harking back to times of struggle and triumph in their lingering warmth. Their conversation was a testament to shared fears vanquished by connection, a reminder of the unifying strength springing from understanding and acknowledgement. As Elijah spoke of his family's legacy, the roots of kinship intertwining with social justice, Karen's pulse quickened with the thrill of storytelling unfurling from such history. This wasn't spectacle or sensationalism. It was a genuine portrayal, unmasking society's latent moral quagmires. Karen's voice grew certain as she directed her camera towards the town, a sense of prescient framing guiding her lens. "This town, it'll hear you. Maybe not today, but soon enough," she reassured, convinced in the way words wove their own momentum when truth was embodied. As the sun slanted, gradually retreating behind the courthouse spires, Elijah understood that this alliance with Karen was more than temporary pragmatic wisdom. It was a heartfelt venture forged in the crucible of shared purpose. They were not just allies now, but advocates unshackled by constraint, focused toward unveiling deeper articulations of hope and identity masked amidst everyday lives. Their steps diverged as they departed and left behind the day's echoes. Karen felt the weight of her notepad, each page brimming with possibilities. The discourse exchanged was more than words. It was an introspective transition bridging narratives between perceived others and their authentic selves, poised to breach the daylight with unyielding light. The journey ahead was cast in shadows, but shone brightly with promise, imbued not with bitterness, but with a resolute desire to incite recognition, a transformative potential lying quietly within every retelling, waiting for that moment of awakening. As Karen went back to her pen and paper, and Elijah found comfort in solitude, the wider world readied itself to learn anew, a subplot rendered anew into the core story, ready to resonate beyond the bounds of Briarwood. With the day drawing to its inevitable close, Elijah found himself on the old back porch of the Johnson family home. The porch had been a constant through the ebb and flow of time, its worn wooden boards holding the heartbeats of past. Sitting there, Elijah felt the weight of memories sliding over him like a cloak, each one a thread of his father's legacy that he had carried, sometimes unknowingly, into battle and back again. The air was warm and slightly sweet, carrying the scent of magnolias from the garden, mixing with nostalgia that wrapped itself around him. It was here that Elijah recalled the teachings his father had imparted, lessons spoken in times of calm and distress alike. Charles Johnson was a man of influence, not by stature but by wisdom, a man whose words could cut through the fog of uncertainty like a beacon. In the evenings, Charles would speak of the battles he had faced, not with weapons, but with words and silent marches, confronting the systemic prejudice woven through the social fabric. "Know your worth, Elijah," his father would say, his voice steady. "And remember, silence is the loudest argument against those who refuse to see." Elijah remembered the stories from his youth vividly, the tales of standing strong when the world seemed intent on pushing you down, the emphasis on integrity and resilience, the insistence that one's identity was not born in the absence of pigmentation, but in the depth of character. His father taught him how battles weren't always fought with fists or weapons, but with the conviction to stand and demand recognition where it was willfully denied. On that porch, a young Elijah had dreamt big dreams amidst the kind of turbulent grown-up talks that both enlightened and unsettled. His father's tireless crusade for justice inspired those around him, and in turn bred a soil rich with determination and rootedness within Elijah. The porch seemed alive with ghostly echoes of discussions once had long ago, a metaphysical testament to a tradition as persistent as it was quiet. In his father's absence, Elijah had turned to these memories like a compass, guiding him unerringly whenever uncertainty clouded his path. But today, facing the scrutiny of unjust assumptions and skeptical gazes, these teachings resonated especially fiercely within him. For Elijah, standing before those who judged him was as much about defending his family's honor as it was about self-preservation. It was a homecoming not simply to roots or heritage, but to an accounting of all things pursued and protected by those who forged paths for him to follow. He could hear his mother's voice, her reassuring tone calming the night skies, a constant in his childhood. She had whispered dreams into the crevices of his mind where certainty hadn't yet settled. Her unwavering belief in fairness, combined with her insistence on always doing what was right, helped shape Elijah's understanding of the world, a learned balance between compassion and conviction. As he sat there, enveloped by the chorus of cicadas, and the distant hum of crickets warming up their nightly serenade, Elijah recognized this space as an unspoken battlefield, one where victories were measured not by accolades, but by the quiet certitude of knowing one's truth. It was Charles's influence that made Elijah stand strong that fateful day when he was stopped and questioned not as a hero, but as a suspect. It was the same influence that let Elijah maintain his composure, knowing that defenses are sometimes built sturdily upon small rebellions against expected norms. His family had taught him to command room by presence alone, not just by vocal projection, but through the strength of silent assurance. And when he silently debated whether his voice still held weight in a world seemingly determined to chip away at certainties, he remembered his father's words, "Never let another's voice outshine your truth." With shadows stretching across the yard, a realization crept upon him. His father's legacy was intricately woven into his own actions, his very existence an homage to those unsung battles waged daily out of spotlight. Elijah leaned back, the chair creaking slightly in acceptance of this meditation. His eyes flickered shut, images intermingling between past lessons and present resolve. Within this peace emerged a deeper understanding that the fight against systemic neglect and identity erasure may never quiet completely, but its rhythm could inspire an ongoing legacy told in silence and retold through courageous actions. For now, as fireflies danced in the dark edges of familiarity, Elijah relinquished himself to the narrative, an inheritance born of struggle, marinated in love. Peaceful though Percy-equal moments might seem, they were the very sparks of private rebellions. Armed with memories fresh on minds and footing newly grounded, Elijah sat in veneration of what his heritage instilled, a nurturing irony born of battlefields both wide and close to home. As the world quieted for the night, he remained a steadfast silhouette against the horizon, a reminder that sometimes the greatest conflicts reshape not the battle lines outlaid, but the quiet dignity reclaimed in continuity. Officer Reynolds sat in the dim confines of his modest living room, a space barely penetrated by the fading twilight. The room, normally a refuge from duty's demands, felt oppressive, the silence bearing down with the weight of conscience. He stared vacantly at the blank, humming television screen, the static air punctuated by the occasional creak of an old house settling into night. His chest felt heavy, burdened by a guilt that had settled uninvited, like a constant companion. The earlier events replayed endlessly in his mind: the old truck, Elijah's composed demeanor, and the silent accusations that colored every exchange. Reynolds found himself ensnared in a web of introspection, pulling at threads that unraveled deeper questions about his role and the inherent biases he had never fully sought to question. The badge he wore had always been more than just a symbol of authority. It was a potent amalgam of duty, responsibility, and, at times, unspoken power. Yet now, it felt like a weight tethered to past injustices, lives altered by quick judgments and the inexorable momentum of systemic inadequacies. His thoughts wandered to the training sessions long ago, sessions that preached protocol but rarely touched upon the implicit understanding that fear and prejudice should never guide an officer's hand. In his mind, he could hear Callahan's voice, unwavering and unyielding, dismissing the potential for fallibility that Reynolds had begun to acknowledge within himself. Reynolds considered Elijah, the strength in his eyes, the tempered defiance in his voice. It had been plain, a language unspoken, yet entirely understood. Despite Elijah's silence, his quiet dignity forced an introspection that Reynolds had not foreseen the day he stopped that truck. The look in Elijah's eyes had been so familiar, reminding Reynolds of faces he'd seen abroad, adversaries humanized by circumstance, blurring the lines between enemy and empathy. He took a deep breath, the act more reflex than relief. In the hushed spaces of the room, the darkened windows transformed into reflective surfaces that mirrored self-examination starkly. Here, alone, Reynolds confronted the ghosts of uniform-clad. His thoughts gravitated toward his own upbringing, a town similar to Briarwood, small-minded at times, but filled with good people nonetheless. Yet good people could still hold patterned prejudices tightly without seeing their entrapment in a cycle perpetuated through generational whispers. His own family had spoken in hushed platitudes that shaped unaware biases, lessons learned through childhood osmosis, alongside bike rides and Sunday picnics. Reynolds's introspection led him to the intersection where personal fail-safe mechanisms faltered. The intellectual safety net dashed against the reality presented by Elijah, a man whose distinguished service deserved more than his off-the-cuff suspicion. In this intersection, he found the seeds of change embedded within a cracked foundation. With a heavy sigh, Reynolds stood and moved towards a drawer nestled beneath a fold of shadow, retrieving a worn leather journal. Its pages were an anthology of personal reflection and resistance, the narrative of a man striving to be better than the sum of his upbringing. Fumbling with the pen, he sought to inscribe upon the paper not only confessions, but a commitment to change, defined not just by words, but by action. Even as Reynolds began to write, each line a muted call for redemption, his notes, varying from jottings of remorse to proactive plans, were an attempt to reconcile what he had become with who he might still be. He found solace in the process, hoping pen and page might become scaffolding upon which to construct pathways for authentic justice. The steady rhythm of his pen became an unspoken vow, reverberating in the hollow quiet of the room. It was a promise to pursue understanding with earnest questions rather than comfort and blind certainty, acknowledging that the journey involved examining not just the world but one's own heart. Perhaps the path toward atonement first slumbered in acknowledgement and reformation, the careful dismantling of constructs that had once appeared unassailable. Reynolds knew change would not come overnight, nor would it absolve all prior actions, but it beckoned with a grace he was determined to follow. And so, amid shadows that obscured but could not conceal, Officer Reynolds took his first tentative step toward transformation, a journey not defined by the uniform, but by resolution, in identity, commitment to sincere human connection over authoritative directive. Here, confronted by the critical interplay between power and empathy, he sought to unpack his role in stories yet unfolding. As dawn approached, and the room's darkness yielded to an understated glow, Reynolds felt lighter, hopeful, a man no longer blind to the weight of his choices, but rather awakened to the power of a changed narrative, steeped in humanity, nurtured in silence, yet poised for exuberant iteration. The early morning sun filtered gently through the tattered curtains of Elijah's modest bedroom, casting soft patterns over a dresser cluttered with memories. Among the medals and framed photographs, one piece stood out, a bronze star etched with wear from numerous journeys, each scratch a testament to a story of courage and sacrifice. Today, this medal was not just a symbol of past valor, but a poignant reminder of battles that continued to rage within and around him. Elijah stood before the dresser, staring at the medal with a complexity that ran deeper than pride. It had been years since its sheen had caught the light of a battlefield sky or pressed into the soil of distant lands. Instead, it now gleamed against the backdrop of a home soil, caught in the gravity of modern-day warfare, marked not by artillery, but by prejudices and misunderstandings. He picked it up thoughtfully, feeling the cool metal against his skin, a sensation grounding him, binding past triumphs to his present predicaments. The Bronze Star had not been won through isolated acts of heroism, but through collective victories alongside fellow soldiers, whose names lived on through silent tributes and personal recollections. Each memory was a mosaic of shared struggle, transcending the boundaries of race or creed, a truth universally unexplored outside the realm of active duty. As a young man, Elijah had once cherished the branch of service as a realm of equality, where discipline and courage were currencies esteemed above all else. Yet, as he now revisited those beliefs through the lens of recent events, he understood the profound disconnect between the respect earned in uniform and his treatment in civilian attire. It was this very paradox that reflected as keenly as his reflection over the polished surface, demanding consideration. He recalled the camaraderie forged amid trials and tribulations, the bonds resilient against chaos and fear. In those fleeting yet pivotal moments, they had been more than soldiers. They had been family, within an ecosystem sustained by loyalty and shared mission. Yet the world beyond the battlefield didn't always echo this inclusive spirit. Those thoughts bled into companionship memories at rest, after long marches, where identities were whispered anecdotes, narratives becoming tapestry threads too intricate for simplicity. The call of tour routines gave way to reality's language, laden with unvarnished truth beyond the ranks. Transcendence, fleeting peace, and open horizons, themes deeply familiar yet precariously lived. Elijah placed the medal deliberately over his heart, feeling history's pulse synchronized with his own. In itself, the star offered no solution to the injustices suffused into societal structures, yet it provided a clarity he needed. It crystallized his determination to navigate this conflict with the same honor he had once shown on foreign lands, imbued with a fearless advocacy for equity and acknowledgement. Inextricably linked to this journey was the unyielding need to champion conversations that unraveled embedded biases and humanized struggles, bypassed by superficial mutterings, to coalesce community and personal narratives into a vision seen not just as an agenda, but embraced reality, a truth not solely Elijah's but shared among those willing to listen deeply. With resolve, he returned the medal gently to its place of honor among cherished tokens, each item a silent scion of identity, bridging intuitiveness with planned purpose. And Elijah knew that this moment marked a continuum of battles fought, ones not steeped in violence but persistent in transmuting silence itself into a voice whose resonance overcomes prejudiced toggles. Determined, he prepared for the day, understanding the importance not just of asserting presence but manifesting action, a tangible allegiance to legacy and integrity. It was a readiness not just to occupy space but to sculpt new environments mirroring aspirations often overshadowed in broader discourse. Stepping out into the vibing morning light, Elijah carried the essence of the medal in more than its metallic permanence. It was ingrained in his self-conception, his outlook, more a part of his ethos than any outer symbol could suggest. With each step, Elijah reiterated the profound impact of standing unbowed and resolute. Moving through town, a symbol of unyielding purpose, Elijah bore more than honors won. He carried the potential for change and the steadfast spirit of dialogue. His journey was imbued with reflective strength and layered resilience, moving past barriers of sheer resistance toward a new dawn of understanding shaped through meaningful acts and collective dreams. His path led him not away but deeper into the community, where the power of narrative lay not merely in recitation, but in transformative conversation, promising action rooted in shared humanity. The call was greater than mere justice. It was an invocation of empathy, drawn from lived experience and tethered to dynamic resolve. Elijah Johnson was more than a decorated soldier, a man turned catalyst with the courage to claim space and the wisdom to inspire others to reimagine what had seemed lost. And in his pursuit, the medal on a modest dresser gleamed, content in the knowledge of its true purpose fulfilled once more. The town hall bustled with an electricity rarely found outside election seasons. Rows of folding chairs lined the wooden floors, and the air was charged with an urgency that had drawn an eclectic mix of concerned citizens, people who had otherwise little in common, but now seemed united in their curiosity and conviction. Draped in flags and framed by portraits of past local leaders, the auditorium felt both intimate and overwhelmingly consequential. Elijah entered, his presence alone commanding attention as conversations dipped momentarily into a hushed reverence. He was here not just as one man seeking justice, but as a representative of wider sentiments held silently but fervently by many. This meeting was more than a forum. It was an arena where truth and perception would clash, guided by narratives yearning to breathe. A podium stood at the front, bleached under the glare of overhead lights, casting illuminating rays onto whoever dared stand and speak. Elijah took a seat near the front, his veins charged with the anticipation that accompanied the possibility of change tangible and almost tactile in its immediacy. Officials settled into their presiding roles under escalating murmurs of anticipation. The mayor, a stout man with decades etched into his features, gestured for quiet. His introduction captured the spirit of urgency, acknowledging not only the immediate incident of Elijah's unwarranted stop, but recognizing the broader systemic challenges requiring introspection and action. Karen Turner was present, her pen poised, eyes keen, capturing every nuance as she prepared to transcribe the evening into a narrative that would expand beyond tonight's confines. Her commitment to truth-telling melded with the gathering's collective energy, realizing that this was story finding its ethos amidst voices continually silenced. One by one, community members rose to speak a cross-section of the town's heartbeat, each testimony a piece of the greater portrait. An elderly woman, stooped with age, recalled with fervent clarity the echoes of the past, lamenting the cycles of bias persisting despite progress. Her voice, frail yet fierce, draped the room in a tapestry of shared memories and unfinished quests. A local businessman followed, originally hesitant but gaining fortitude, as he spoke of wanting his children to grow up understanding equality, not through lessons taught in discomfort, but as natural as learning the alphabet, the vision of a community reflecting inclusivity by instinct, not exception. All deliberations eventually wove back to Elijah, the day at the roadside, and the emblematic stature it had assumed, a litmus measuring society's respect and acknowledgement. In a room rife with layered narratives, his was the fulcrum, balancing diverging perceptions but unified in truth's pursuit. When Elijah finally stood, the room seemed to hold its collective breath, each inhalation captured in the pause, for here was a man who embodied not just the grievances but the aspirations of journeys begun yet never completed. "I did not seek attention that day," Elijah began, his tone modulating between calm and commanding. "All I wanted was to return to a place that should feel like home, but merely retold the outsider's tale writ in silence." His voice did not waver as he seamlessly threaded together the fragments of his story, the dedication to duty, the sacrifices abroad, and the unceremonious confrontation with distrust at the hands of those meant to protect. Terms hung in the auditorium, punctuated by applause in minor key, bearing witness to acknowledgement, not just waiting but demanding airtime. "What happened to me should concern every single one of us," Elijah continued, his voice foreshadowing an urgent appeal, not just because of what was done in that moment, but because of what it says about the kind of world we're silently endorsing through mere complacency. Elijah's willingness to invoke shared responsibility crafted both lightning rod and olive branch, a challenge to somnolent bystanders but also an impetus for refuge seekers. He called not merely for policy revision, but for cultural rejuvenation, a mandate not bound by superficial adjustments, but substantive internal metamorphoses. Eyes focused on him, some teeming with understanding, others contemplative or critical, yet all engaged in a moment no longer remote, but real. As the exchanges folded into one another in earnest discourse, the printed words chronicled by Karen observed the broadening of societal evolution, a gathering challenging the paradigms once defined by rigid geography. This, a collective diagnosis inviting, welcoming, embracing action, Elijah concluded succinctly, leaving behind a resolve as firm as ocean's edge, a testimony, poised resolutely, transforming recollection into forward movement. The echoes of his voice resonated amidst applause now thundering in shared acknowledgement, a vocal affirmation for change, to transcend temporal constraints. In the hushed aftermath, what had initially begun as a small-town meeting unfolded into a revelation of human spirit and possibility, a testament to proactive dialogues and yesterday's scars finally exposed to healing daylight. It laid groundwork not only for individual redemption, but for recalibration of grounded belonging when met with intersection and reverence. Holding up more than a mirror, a new map removed reliable borders, narrated through hollowed resistance, Elijah retraced steps, emboldened by groundswell shifting beneath. Now grounded in determination, buoyed by thousands declaring the conventional undone by silenced rebellion, a pause broken toward shared dignity. As the echoes of the town hall meeting lingered, twining through Briarwood's narrow streets, a revelation emerged, unfurling quietly but with disruptive ripples. It happened in the most unexpected of places, at the fringes of an unassuming diner, where conversation flowed liberally and anonymity cloaked both the curious and concerned. Officer Reynolds drifted into Bella's diner one quiet morning, seeking refuge from the toll of introspection that had become his constant companion. The diner was a mainstay, a steady heartbeat within Briarwood, familiar and unchanging despite the trials outside its doors. Its walls, yellowed by years of hospitality, whispered stories as rich and layered as the patrons who frequented its booths. He had barely settled into his customary corner when Callahan slid into the seat opposite him, his face tight with the lingering grudges that seemed to cling more resolutely with each passing day. An unspoken agreement hung between them, a fragile ceasefire born from necessity more than desire to actually reconcile. They exchanged nods, a mechanical civility shared between colleagues who had seen both mundane and extraordinary moments together, yet who now found themselves uncomfortably at odds. Callahan spoke first, his voice laced with defensiveness and a brittle edge that cracked with unsecured doubts. "Reynolds, this whole circus, it's gone too far," Callahan began, stabbing his spoon into a cooling cup of coffee with an impatience that underscored his words. "You know what people are saying, half the damn town's against us now." Reynolds absorbed Callahan's words, allowing them to settle like sediment in a pool before replying. He chose his response carefully, aware that what came next could fracture more than just his partnership, but his standing with those entrenched on the wrong side of conscience. "It's not about them being against us," Reynolds replied quietly, each word weighted with intention. "It's about the choices we've made, and maybe, just maybe, some of them weren't right." The admission hung between them, a ghostly presence that refused to be buried under Callahan's gruff demeanor. Reynolds had spoken aloud what many refused even to whisper, a renunciation not of duty, but of inflexible interpretations that had failed those they sworn to protect. For a moment it seemed that Callahan might respond with the vitriol his rigid frame projected, but instead a flicker of something unexpected passed over his features, a vulnerability not often displayed, an ember of understanding buried deep beneath layers of professional armor. Reynolds caught it, brief though it was, and pressed on, seeking the truth beneath old defenses. "We've become too comfortable confusing being right with being righteous. Maybe it's time to accept we've been seeing things one way for too long," Reynolds added, his resolve strengthened by the quiet truths discovered in solitude. "Look, Callahan, I'm not saying everything's on us, but Elijah deserves more than what we gave." Callahan softened, his gaze dropping to the scratched linoleum tabletop where a vision refracted like a mirage. Two young officers, idealistic, envisioning rank not as a separator but a unifier. It conjured a sentiment shaded by experience but illuminated with a glow of what might still be. A tension-tinged silence spread. This wasn't betrayal or abandonment, but a juxtaposition of lessons learned and new pathways untread. Callahan, in understanding, sighed, a reluctant release of tension long held, conceding to the dusk of revelation. "We both do—" Callahan stopped, struggling against defenses long calcified, but something in Reynolds' unflinching gaze urged continuation. Maybe you're right. We owe it to him, to everyone, to get it right." The exchange was not so much a definitive shift as a dawning realizations as delicate as the morning light filtering through the diner window, and captured the essence of change before the town fully understood the potential therein. It was the awakening of shared narratives, tinted with the richness of diversity, echoing beyond the confines of Bella's diner into Briarwood's broader consciousness. With a measured understanding, Callahan extended a hand over the table, their silent pact, speaking to more than mutual respect, but a journey, unresolved, beginning anew, a determined exploration of how to balance scales leveraged by history's intimidating heft. As Reynolds departed Bella's diner, emboldened by their unexpected reconciliation, a sense of unease subsided, yielding to a commitment, a pledge tucked quietly into the midnight hour's cadence, acknowledged by the twinned truths of introspection and transparency. This hidden revelation ushering in newly kindled courage, meditated from these earnest dialogues and unfurled toward the awaited dawn, capturing a narrative where past and future merged into soliloquies of hope poised at perpetual thresholds against skewing realities. In the threads left behind, stories once disjointed wove together, loose strands finding order within kinetic realizations, establishing chords abroad akin to the familiar refrains of old. Simply in knowing each step accrued meaning as they strode into a realm of greater acceptance, laden with promise. Amidst the porches, the roads lined with magnolia trees, this shifting perspective mirrored growth. Seedlings taken root in the unyielding movement toward clearer skies, a committed pilgrimage of understanding. For here, amongst the undulating whispers of shared dreams, change awaited only confirmation, echoing against skies of deepening, azure endings. As Karen Turner sat at her cluttered desk, the raw energy from the town hall still coursed through her veins like an electric current, refusing to be grounded. Her notepad lay open, pages scribbled with fragments of dialogue, spontaneous quotes, and insights that had poured forth like a deluge. Elijah's voice, resonant and unwavering, was her anchor as she transformed those scratchings into a coherent narrative, a story poised to reach far beyond the borders of Briarwood. She began typing with fervor, her fingers dancing across the keys, a symphony of urgency and clarity. This wasn't just journalism to her, it was vindication. Her articles had the power to elevate Elijah's experience into more than just a local incident. It was a microcosm of a national reckoning, illustrating the complex tapestry of race, respect, and justice. With each word, Karen crafted the narrative as vividly as a painter might compose a masterpiece. Her skillful penmanship began by setting the scene of the day Elijah was stopped, a dramatic depiction of the old beat-up truck against the backdrop of a town shadowed by its own past. She painted Elijah not merely as a victim of an unjust stop, but a hero showcasing dignity in the face of blindness, a figure of earned reverence despite the world's attempts to overlook him. Decorated war hero or suspicious stranger? The words jumped out from the page, a heading designed not just to inform but to provoke reflection. She outlined Elijah's military service, his valor set down as stark testament against the silent prejudice that lingered like an insidious fog. Suddenly, among the shadows of her workroom, the phone chimed, a stark interruption slicing through her creative bubble. She hesitated, acknowledging the disruption with momentary annoyance before answering. "Karen, it's Phil from the Tribune," the deep voice echoed, belonging to her editor, a man known for his pragmatic approach and a nose for stories that sang with the resonance of shared humanity. "Phil," Karen responded, leaning back with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. She knew her instincts had led her to the heart of this unfolding story, but Phil's voice carried the weight of industry authority that could amplify it. "I've been reading your drafts. They're bold, Karen, and powerful. I want this on the front page," he declared, an imperceptible tremor betraying the excitement that Karen knew often preceded wider recognition. "People need to see this. What happened to Elijah? What's happening in Briarwood? It's the kind of story that holds a mirror up to society." The unexpected validation fueled Karen's determination. She had always believed in the power of the press to wield change, but now, the acclamation of her editor served to reaffirm her conviction. "Thanks, Phil," she replied, heartened yet succinct, a pause filled with the silent understanding that this was no ordinary assignment, but an opportunity to spark dialogue on a grand scale. Hanging up, Karen felt the echoes of Phil's endorsement ripple outward, enveloping her in the certainty required to push further. The headlines, crafted now, morphed into pulsating truths, designed to stand stark against apathy and ignite merit in multitudes, becoming entwined in deciding outcomes. She steered her narrative beyond mere recitation of events, weaving context into threads that considered the wider implications, how a town's actions mirrored a country's struggle to reconcile its identity amidst social discriminations no longer consigned to history's margins. She wrote of collective awakening, portraying Elijah not just as a soldier but also a catalyst, inspiring reflection, within the echo chamber of society's shared conscience. Throughout her deadlines, Karen remained tethered to the essence Elijah presented: humble integrity, imbued with valor, underscored by the yearning for recognition exceeding superficialities. The narrative was his, but the call to action resonated through every word she penned. A greater empathy beckoning readers into the embrace of unvoiced crusades demanding visibility. Within the encompassing activity, Karen could envision the article beyond its printed form, a clarion call with potential to spark conversations echoing through town halls, school hallways, and even into the corridors of power. For in Elijah's story lay the present moment's imperative, one rooted in reevaluation and eradicating boundaries rendered meaningless upon introspection and reconsideration. As she packaged her work, readying it for submission, Karen grasped the magnitude of her role within this reflective dialogue, ascribed for truth, capturing nuance, entrenched tenacity, and quiet revolution. Her ambition lay not in accolades but within awakening social consciousness towards tangible transformation. And so it was that Karen, poised over her keyboard, pressed send, sealing her invigorating labor for publication. With a satisfied resolve, she envisioned passivity transformed into participation, these chronicles collapsing divides for those willing to witness their own reflection in Elijah's own illuminating journey. Beyond her room's confines, autumn leaves pirouetted upon the breeze, communicating secrets sung by seasons renewing time's dance. Karen Turner knew this story held the potential to bear more than just witness. It carried within it a promise that humanity's potential brims ever further for those daring to see past shadows into the beckoning light. Elijah's family gathered in their living room, the walls adorned with photographs capturing moments of history and togetherness. Each image told tales of laughter, sacrifice, and legacy, a visual narrative marking the passage of time and enduring bonds. Today, the room hummed with a tension that brought the past into a stark dialogue with the present. Mary Johnson, Elijah's sister, sat perched beside their mother, her brow furrowed with the weight of years caught between pride and concern. While she had watched Elijah face challenges both domestically and abroad, never had she thought his return would prompt such an internal reckoning within the community. The stories about the traffic stop, replayed again and again, had lit a fire she never anticipated would draw such focus onto their family. "Do you think this will change anything?" Mary asked softly, addressing Leah Johnson, their matriarch, with an undertone of hope, both cautious and longing. Her question painted the unrelenting struggle against systems that sought familiarity and complacency rather than change. Leah leaned back, eyes thoughtful, drawing on the quiet strength she had nurtured through years spent guiding a family through turbulent social turmoils. "I want to believe that people will finally see, this isn't just about Elijah. It's about all of us, those who've faced assumptions rather than understanding," Leah replied. Her voice, firm yet tender, carried echoes of the conversations she had shared in confidence with her late husband, Charles. Elijah, seated across from them, absorbed the exchange, knowing that their measured optimism was a counterweight to the anger and hurt simmering beneath the surface. For him, this wasn't just about vindication, but about casting light on enduring narratives that demanded recognition and resolution. As if summoned by the weight of unspoken thoughts, a knock resounded at the door. Elijah's cousin Marcus poked his head in, bringing with him a tangible undercurrent of the outside world pressing closer. Marcus was not only family but Elijah's confidant, frequently sharing his burden and tempering youthful fervor with shared experience. "Someone's talking about organizing a march, a show of solidarity, support, everything," Marcus shared, the words tinged with excitement but also awareness of the potential flashpoints such actions inevitably sparked. The room fell silent momentarily, the implications of such a step weaving into the fabric of their conversations. Elijah could feel the air grow dense, with the unyielding fallout of hope meeting determination, a space not unfamiliar, but one emboldened by visible seams of change offered by unwavering community discourse. Mary turned to Elijah, her gaze penetrating. "It sounds important, Eli. People are starting to connect the dots, starting to see the patterns we've lived through." In this living room, where generations had measured personal aspirations against lived realities, the traction gained from recent discussions felt momentous. Elijah nodded, the gravity of the decision resonating with his principles, yet aware of the corresponding fragments of risk. "We have to be careful, but we can't afford to do nothing," Elijah said, the clarity in his voice echoing over years of ingrained resilience. "Mom always said never to let history repeat itself, but change means we step forward, together." Leah watched as her son articulated what lay within many an unspoken cry for not only justice, but progression tethered by a belief in shared humanity transcending individual fear and societal erasure. Her hand reached out, comforting Elijah with a touch that carried the wisdom of generations engrossed in similar pursuits for recognition without prejudice. Marcus shuffled closer, a gleam of brotherhood, a kinship forged through shared histories animating his demeanor. "It's time we harness their momentum. Let them see who we are, Elijah." His encouragement was warm, offering solidarity not rooted in obligation but unfaltering support. As dialogue within the room fermented toward resolution, Elijah was reminded that family bonds were dyads, dual strands interwoven uniquely through experiences lived collectively. Each voice beside him presented dynamics, turning discourse into action, a testament granting courage through heritage from which they all drew life. In this home beneath the protective eaves, built by remembrance, Elijah embraced the day's potential. He was driven not merely by a need for personal redemption, but powered instead by vested communal transformation. The ripples would reach beyond neighborhood borders, felt across parishes and spoken in tones echoing resilience. But for now, Elijah joined his family in weaving their heartbeats into a singular rhythm of hope, a synchronized pulse, ready to confront not only discouragement, but create mosaic truths inspiring the aspirations beneath muted horizons. Upon leaving the living room, resolved steeled through shared purpose, Leah watched with pride, a vision of change already in human motion, and called after Elijah, her voice blending with shadows into dawn's nascent light. "We walk together, Eli." And so Elijah, alongside countless others, prepared to step into a realm where justice and equality intertwined with the persistent melodies of their family creed, an invitation to shift paradigms under pendulous skies, waiting to convene amidst landscapes redefined. As evening draped its shadow over Briarwood, Elijah sat alone on the porch, the air around him heavy with contemplation. The cicadas sang their monotonous tune, underscoring the silence that blanketed the small town. Elijah's mind, a turbulent sea, revolved around memories of past injustices, times when his voice had been silenced, when his dignity had been questioned, not by the merit of his actions, but through the prism of unyielding bias. He closed his eyes, haunted by one particular incident, long buried but never truly forgotten. Years ago, during a brief leave from service, Elijah had returned to Briarwood with hopeful eyes and a buoyant heart, longing for the comfort of home. The uniform he wore, a badge of pride, said that he belonged to something greater than himself, yet the welcome was not what he imagined. One evening, as he passed a local store, a group of young men, splintered from the remnants of long-held prejudices, called out to him. Their words were laced with derision, snide comments cloaked in the pretension of a jest. They saw his uniform as a threat, encroaching upon their narrow world-view, unmindful of the honor that came with it. "You think you're something now, huh, soldier boy?" Their taunts buzzed like persistent wasps, embedding themselves under his skin. Elijah remembered the sharp sting of humiliation, the burn of his skin against the cold night. His training urged discipline, a calm front against provocation. Inside, however, he battled shame and anger for a society unwilling to see beyond his skin, to acknowledge his sacrifice without conditions. In those moments, he felt the invisible chains that attempted to bind his spirit to a lesser narrative. It was a stark juxtaposition to the values he had fought for: a frustrating reminder that while he could stand shoulder to shoulder with comrades abroad, at home, he was just another face in a crowd labeled by misunderstanding. Elijah opened his eyes, the specters of old echoes fading into the warm glow of the present. He knew those prejudices hadn't simply vanished, they had shifted under the surface, subverting spirit through attuned navigations. But back then, instead of retorting or demanding justice, he had walked away. Silence had been his shield, a reprimand against the temptation to retaliate not in anger, but through missions, completed, uncelebrated, cries unanswered. Yet here and now change thrummed in the rhythm of his breathing. It danced in the collective actions of his community, stirred alive by conversations once smothered by resigned acceptance. The stories that had constrained him were no longer just his to bear. They resonated, amplified by unity and urgency. As if acting on instinct, Elijah's hand moved toward an object he had carried through every journey, a small, battered notebook, its pages rife with scribbled reflections, dreams unbroken by circumstance, and queries unguarded by reality. It had been his confidant, a silent witness to battles waged within and compromises weighed against the hope of understanding. Flipping through the pages, he found an entry penned during a particularly trying time overseas, a time when facing external enemies was juxtaposed with facing inner turmoil stemming from latent prejudice at home. Can legacy withstand the silence? The entry read. Even then, the question had been persistent, a nagging pain residing in the space between action and consequence. Tonight, Elijah knew his legacy, his family's legacy, would not persist in silence. The fractures in town's history, once viewed as inconsequential, had collided with the present to form a tapestry demanding repair, not simply acknowledgement. A deeply personal revolution was unfolding, where silence yielded to a wealth of shared narratives bursting to be told. His mother's words, "We walk together, Eli," surfaced with clarity, an invocation knitted into each stitch of courage. It was a roadmap rendered visible through collective gazes, risen in recognition rather than skepticism, a course charted not just in ambition, but in authentic realizations. Elijah set the notebook aside, contented by the knowledge that the isolation once imposed upon him by history was capitulating to community partnerships. This was not a nostalgia driven by romanticism. It was a buildup of channels, guided by truth's radiance, an acceptance that loving a place didn't require sanctuary from it, but rather a profound commitment to reshaping it. Tomorrow promised further steps toward unveiling the layers of experiences long tucked away. As he stood beneath the expansive southern night, the stars above murmured their ageless song, a song folded seamlessly into his story, complex yet undeniably his. No longer confined by past solitudes and burdens unshared, Elijah turned back toward the warmth of his home, knowing that each memory recaptured now stitched yet another line into the legacy, reminding him of what was and solidifying what could yet be. With these steps across time, through alleys given voice, amid dialogues newly embraced, Elijah was prepared to write the next chapter, fearlessly, authentically, resplendent in the dawning potential of a journey far from concluded, a tale retold where silence had no place and where hope incessantly flourished, resilient and unyielding. The morning sun cut through the fog of uncertainty like a beacon, illuminating the path that lay before Officer Reynolds. He sat in his cruiser, parked on the outskirts of Briarwood, the hum of the engine a comforting white noise against the soundtrack of his own chaotic thoughts. He had reached a crossroads, not signposted by physical markers, but by a moral imperative that refused to be ignored. The town hall meeting, Elijah's impassioned words, and the weight of his own evolving conscience had coalesced into an undeniable force. Reynolds knew he could no longer remain passive in the face of the biases he had recognized in himself and others. Yet, the leap from realization to action was fraught with trepidation, an exploration of vulnerability he had habitually shied away from. His fingers grazed the steering wheel, each swirl beneath his touch reminding him of the power he wielded. power that required careful navigation to ensure it didn't crush those beneath his oversight. The reckoning was personal, an unraveling of indoctrination threaded into his identity. A binding removed one stitch at a time. He recalled the gentle, insistent push from Karen's article, now an anthem resonating through the threads of community consciousness. For the first time in his career, he felt a trepidation not linked to danger, but to introspection, a demand not for obedience, but understanding. With a steely resolve fueling his decision, Reynolds keyed the ignition into silence and stepped out into the crisp morning air. He was not embarking on a quest for external validation, but seeking to align duty, a job, often seen in black and white, with a nuanced palette of humanity. His destination wasn't dictated by duty's demands, but by a personal endeavor to seek forgiveness and foster reconciliation. Reynolds approached the nondescript house cautiously, not because of potential threat, but due to the quiet significance held in the steps he took. The Johnson family home stood humbly amid a landscape of hedgerows and memories, a nexus of heritage and hope, ever resilient. He knocked, the sound echoing not just upon the door's frame, but deep within himself, each beat synchronized with the rhythm of intention and reserved optimism. The wait felt unbearably long, catching each breath in anticipation, before finally the door eased open. Elijah stood framed by the doorway, his expression initially unreadable, but softened by recognition and a tempered curiosity. The tension between them was palpable, like two warriors on a battlefield, yet aware that the struggle lay not in confrontation, but in conversation. "Officer Reynolds," Elijah greeted, his voice neither cold nor hostile, but measured, acknowledging without conceding. The threshold was not just physical but metaphoric, a line not crossed by steps alone but by sincerity of purpose. "Thank you for seeing me, Elijah," Reynolds began, his words uncertain but propelled by integrity. "I've been thinking a lot since the meeting. I wanted to come here, to talk, if you're open to it." Elijah paused, the weight of Reynolds' words hanging between them like a bridge half built. Deciding to trust the moment's gravity, he nodded and stepped aside, an acceptance that resided in doubt, yet sought the clarity conversation could wield. Inside, as they sat amidst the echoes of generations past, Reynolds chose his path carefully, navigating the precariously balanced dialogue with transparency. "I've been part of the problem," he confessed, the admission stripped of pride but layered with intricate honesty. "I see that now. I'm not proud of it, Elijah, but I want to do better. I want to understand." For Elijah, this wasn't about immediate absolution, but an acknowledgement of humanity's complexity, intertwined with individual choices. He listened, the weight of history echoing in Reynolds' plea, as he battled the duality of guarded skepticism and hoped for reconciliation. "Understanding doesn't come easy," Elijah replied, his voice imbued with the grace of years lived in the imbalance of expectation and perception. "It takes time, commitment. It means being willing to see, really see, beyond the badge." Reynolds nodded, absorbing Elijah's words with the openness of a disciple embarking on a spiritual awakening. "I've realized that serving isn't about the badge, but about the people, about bridging gaps I've ignored until now." The conversation shifted from confessional to collaborative, the catalyst of shared humanity creating warmth amid an initially uncertain climate. They spoke of pasts divided by roles but presently united by purpose. For every tale of missteps Reynolds shared, Elijah countered with narrative-infused solutions grounded in resilience. Together, they envisioned initiatives rooted in community healing, aimed at uplifting voices too often drowned in generalized assumptions, loving a place and improving it, anchored by respect and empathy in lieu of antiquated prejudices. Conversation waned into a rhythm akin to reconciliation, an alliance formed beyond verbalized intent and molded by earnest action. As they rose to leave, something unspoken yet deeply understood lingered. This meeting hadn't solved everything, but it was a start, a promise nurtured in fertile ground of newfound camaraderie. The world outside was just as they had left it, But to Reynolds it felt different, as though perception itself had shifted slightly in its frame. Standing there, they shared one final glance, an acknowledgement of a journey neither companion could undertake alone, but one which promised hope where once hope had dwindled. As Elijah watched Reynolds depart, he felt the faintest sense of burgeoning grace, a narrative redefined, not by solitude but community, folding into acceptance of every voice yearning for genuine integration. Change was never perfect, seldom linear, but sometimes in taking the first step, one discovered new pathways upon which the tapestry of reliability and shared purpose could assemble. And in the haunting tendrils of Briarwood's murmuring air, reconciliation formed, one conversation at a time. The story of Elijah Johnson's encounter on that fateful day and the unexpected ripple effects had left Briarwood on the brink of transformation. During times of relative silence throughout the town, the air hummed with the weight of recent events, discussions that would inevitably divide and define friendships, families, and the very fabric holding the town together. Long-held grievances and a yearning for justice began to bubble to the surface, finding voice in living rooms, cafes, and community gatherings, creating a fissure palpable in its intensity. The Johnson family's ordeal had pulled into focus an oft-unspoken reality that reverberated throughout the community, one which challenged everyday interactions that had comfortably avoided deeper examination. Not all were ready to embrace the change. Among the resistance, opinions formed cast between the lines of comfort and fear, a base of misunderstanding, fueled both by historical legacy and the unknown consequences that acknowledging systemic flaws might entail. As whispers of reform grew louder, the town's peace was tested, manifesting now in both overt and covert expressions of loyalty and resentment. Among those who resisted were people like Curtis Holloway, a lifelong friend of the Johnson family who now found his allegiance tested by the widening chasm. As a local business owner, Curtis relied on the goodwill of both sides of the fractured town. Privately, he wrestled with memories of shared youth with Elijah, somewhat laughter, dreams entertained under the shade of magnolia trees that lined Briarwood's park. Yet, when pressure mounted from patrons questioning Elijah's grievances, as reflected through words spoken behind guarded lips at Curtis's corner store, the once easy camaraderie became a tightrope, challenging his sympathies conditioned by both personal bias and economic consequence. Echoes of the town's storied past floated within these spaces, touching raw nerves laid bare by the ongoing discourse. The past had re-emerged, shaping present loyalties in convoluted pretzels of identity, affection rebutted by suspicion, dialogue incited by accusations, and amidst it all, Curtis felt torn. In contrast, Elijah's former high school coach, Bradley Jackson, exemplified those who embraced the call for introspection and societal evolution. Akin to a guiding lighthouse, accustomed to tempests, Bradley invited alumni and faculty from Briarwood High to informal talks, fostering understanding through shared experiences and championing the importance of asking uncomfortable yet necessary questions. During gatherings at the school's gymnasium, Bradley's deep voice resonated above the hum of hesitant voices. Every action, every silence speaks. It's time we let courage speak louder. His words found fertile ground among the young and the old alike, seeds planted within minds eager to push past entrenched boundaries and rethink concepts heretofore undivided. As the discussions unfolded, relationships were defined anew, kindled by reflection and discomfort mirroring the vulnerability many worked tirelessly to unveil and understand. Students grew inspired by the possibilities Bradley and other proactive community members proposed, discussions forming dialogues many had previously avoided. Elijah found himself at the heart of these waves, both celebrated and scrutinized by perspectives reframed through delving into biases that had shaped Briarwood's generational lens. Not seeking to be a savior, he remained open, consistent, allowing his legacy to steward beyond his family, a beacon challenging others to engage and evolve past the stagnancy of past assumptions. Attending one of Bradley's informal talk sessions, Elijah observed bonds quietly solidifying into collaborations, a confluence of those desiring unity beyond surface cordiality. In this nexus of collaboration, clearing initial discomfort gave way to understanding, not just centered on his own experiences, but extending far into the lives of others newly confident enough to share candid tales of expectations unmet or perceptions unevenly assigned. As days passed, these interactions showcased Briarwood's emerging duality, a town tugging towards redefinition amid nostalgic clinging to identity fragments staining paths traced in assumed convention. Yet, among those hopeful dialogues, old alliances creaked under pressure, and friendships tempered by resistance shattered, unable to withstand climate tilting toward change. Navigating these dynamics, Elijah discovered in the midst of division a remarkable resilience, a community amidst self-reform, casting light upon aspects many had long relegated to darkness. The courage exhibited wasn't audacious, but purposeful. Stepping forward meant challenging the assumptions forged by history and, through collective effort, surpassing them. Even as it tore parallel paths among his friends and family, this period of turmoil drove new roots into Briarwood's soil, digging past the fossils of prejudice ingrained within to a fertile realization holding potential yet explored. And in no small part, Elijah found himself and his family earnestly intertwined within this unfolding legacy. As the winds of change swept the town, those willing to confront its billowing veils sowed newfound harmony in compassion's echo, a harmony capable of resonating well beyond their small community, if cultivated with care and resolve. And so it was through the cacophony and grace displayed quietly within Briarwood's ongoing narrative lines, rewrote themselves through the folding of divisive terrain, coalescing stories toward unison with hope penned in silence. The town continued its slow dance of reassessment and introspection as history, with a gentle push, informed the places they would soon stand. As the evening deepened into night, Elijah found himself alone again in the solitude of his room, the familiar noises of the house settling into calmness around him. But despite the enveloping quiet, his mind was anything but. The day's tensions and victories meshed into a tumultuous kaleidoscope of emotion and thought. Each decision, each interaction replayed in his mind like an endless loop he couldn't switch off. It was on nights like this when the phantoms of his past emerged most vividly. The unseen scars of wars fought seam into the fabric of his being. It wasn't the physical battles abroad that plagued him now, but the battles within, the ones that echoed through time, bridging what was and what is. He lay back, closing his eyes against the darkness, only to meet the vividness of memory. The familiar clamor of the battlefield surged into focus, a juxtaposition of chaos and clarity, where survival was dictated not just by training, but by instinct and sheer will. Faces of camaraderie and loss spun through his thoughts, interlaced with the undeniable truth that those wars hadn't ended when his service did. Instead, they've contorted into nightly landscapes, relentless assailants in the silence of solitary moments. A bead of sweat traced a path down his temple, mirroring tears shed in silence over years spent compressing trauma rather than releasing it. Elijah had learned that valor didn't erase vulnerability. It often amplified it, creating echoes that reverberated through reminders never entirely laid to rest. The sound of distant mortar fire morphed into memories of shouted commands reverberating around him, past missions blurred with present conflicts entrenched in everyday tentatives. Those echoes, tinged with remorse and longing for camaraderie lost beyond the hues of dawn, rolled over him like a tide seeking shores still unfamiliar. He thought of those left behind, falls marked by prayers murmured beneath breath's vestige, their names immortalized in his nightly vigils. This lonely roll call of memory asked not forgiveness for what was done, but a reckoning of what continued. unchecked, staining moments of tranquility with token whispers. But here, alone with memories he could only share in part, Elijah realized he didn't face these incursions unaided. The strength of his family, their understanding and support, cast lines of fortitude through even the darkest pits threatening to swallow him whole. Their voices, his mother's assurances, his sister's consistent encouragement, echoed against the din inside his head, crafting lifelines when the weight grew unbearable. He turned to his hand, where a small, worn photo lived a grainy image of his unit, their faces alive with defiant hope standing against the backdrop of vast, unknown terrains. That small token served simultaneously as reminder and anchor, a realization that the battles fought were shared, transcending the loneliness of survival, wrapped instead in companionship and determination. They had all carried invisible burdens, a patchwork of memories and dreams etched into stillness long untold. As his fingers traced the outline of his comrades' faces, Elijah let a deep breath settle, feeling the rise of solidarity fuel his resolve. He allowed the melancholy to ebb, replaced instead by the memory of shared resilience and reflection harmonizing against irrevocable silence. Despite the night's darkness, a subtle gleam opposite where he lay caught his attention. A small medal resting on the dresser. The bronze star offered no rebuke, only steadfast testimony to the sacrifices that defined him, not by trauma alone, but by the strength fostered through overcoming. Elijah understood then that he couldn't fight the ghosts of war in isolation, nor the remnants of discord left to echo through Briarwood's hesitant reform. He had allies beyond the confines of past and present battles, those whose voices fortified the cause for reform. Firm believers in the possibility of collective healing writ visible whenever courage melds with conversation. Exhaling slowly, Elijah swung his feet to the floor, feeling the cool touch of hardwood beneath them, a tactile reminder of both grounding and tomorrow's potential. Each breath in meted out the remnants of tension, a quiet recalibration assured by the grace of reflection. As the first signs of dawn began to lighten the sky, the call of early birds punctuating the blanket of night, Elijah knew this night wouldn't be his last battle with solemnity, that the road ahead was neither flattened nor void of challenges, but intertwined within struggle lay a legacy defined not by fear but by constant rebirth, a journey compounded through prisms of choice and awareness, waiting to be continually refined. And in the sharing under these awakening skies, in acknowledging humanity's unsung melody, Elijah felt prepared to meet new days armed less with the armor of regret and more through the resolute acceptance shared by those whose presence buoyantly called for action in transformation's steadfast song. Dawn's embrace laced the horizon, a herald of change, adorning courage unforeseen, yet uniquely cherished, set forth with each step aligning towards, for within every shade and whisper, echoes yielded to harmony, an unwavering chorus uniting past, present, and forthcoming, all awaiting the gentle unfolding of untethered hope. The days that followed were filled with an undeniable energy, a palpable shift in both the air and attitudes of Briarwood. The conversations and reflections sparked by Elijah's story stretched beyond the immediate circle of family and friends, weaving their way into the fabric of the town itself. Change was coursing forward with the inevitability of a river carving through rock. Among those galvanized by this spirit of transformation was Elijah's friend and fellow veteran, Marcus. Their paths had once converged on a distant battlefield, where bonds were forged from necessity and unyielding fraternity. Now, Marcus found a new calling on the home front, one that resonated as deeply as any mission undertaken abroad. It began one evening over steaming cups of coffee at the corner cafe, as the sun set in hues of crimson and gold behind the silhouette of Briarwood's skyline. Marcus leaned forward, a spark kindling in his eyes, fueled by an urgency that had been brewing within him. "Eli," he began, his voice a rich tapestry of resolve and anticipation. "We've been talking about change, but it's time we organize. Really organize." His words struck Elijah with the force of long-held conviction, waiting to be voiced. Marcus was right. Discussions and anecdotes of shared struggles wouldn't suffice. They needed structure, They needed momentum to build a collective that could amplify their call far beyond echoing chambers. "What are you thinking?" Elijah asked, willing Marcus' vision to meld with his own burgeoning ideas. "We've got an untapped force here, Elijah. The veterans. People respect our service, our sacrifice. What better way to drive home the need for justice and equality than by harnessing that respect into something tangible?" Marcus replied, a plan unfolding with each word, fueled by camaraderie and an acute awareness of their potential. The notion wasn't just inspiring, it was necessary, a way to channel the shared experiences of those who had served, repurposed into leading conversations that could pierce through resistant exteriors and archaic narratives. The veterans of Briarwood, often seen through the lens of honor, carried with them stories that mirrored those Elijah faced, yet amplified by the collective sacrifice representative of a larger kinship. Together, Elijah and Marcus began to formulate their strategy. They envisioned a coalition, a group within the heart of Briarwood, united by the singular aim of driving change, using their military backgrounds not as an identity, but as a bridge to wider understanding. It was a call to arms of a different kind, one rooted in dialogue, education, and community initiatives designed to uplift and inform. They imagined gatherings and spaces transformed into arenas for healing, where veterans could share their stories, bridging divides, dismantling misconceptions, and weaving threads of commonality through rich and diverse tapestries. Solidarity emerged as a balm, a tool to educate while eradicating the ignorance that often drove prejudice into law's shadow. The excitement was infectious. Soon, their plan spread among the network of veterans within the town, a network strengthened by shared lines of communication formed during service and fortified by a mutual, abiding respect. Elijah and Marcus weren't just leading a conversation, they were constructing a movement, poised to ripple beyond Briarwood. As they delved into these efforts, the staggering potential became increasingly tangible. Each meeting brought together individuals galvanized by the energy of purpose, their stories fusing into a collective consciousness, a powerful testament to determination, resilience, and the unbreakable weave of community. The coalition, aptly named Unity in Service, became a beacon for those seeking to align the values forged in combat with the principles necessary for peace and progress at home. Its light didn't just shine from the camaraderie of those who wore uniforms, but from all who believed in fostering understanding beyond superficial divides. As Elijah stood before their growing assembly one evening, he reflected on the journey, the battles fought alone, and those he would face alongside these brothers and sisters in arms. His story had become more than personal. It was a touchstone that beckoned others to delve into their reflections, embrace their vulnerability, and share their truths. "Together we've faced the worst man can bring," Elijah addressed the room, his voice steady with quiet strength. "Now, let's be the best man can offer. Here, where our stories intersect, let us remind the world what united service truly means." Applause erupted with a fervor that mirrored the collective heartbeat of pulse, synchronizing across different walks of life, heritage, and experiences, all aligned under the shared vision of foundational change. Upon departure that night, the streets of Briarwood wrapped them in tangible hope, a sense that realignment was not merely an aspiration, but a present call to benevolent arms. Born from acknowledging every voice together, they had transcended the episodic into the realm of enduring legacy. Each step forward was a testament to progress, the quiet unfolding of new stories rendered within the bounds of cohesive opposition, fostering equality, a palpable truth rewritten with every engaged heart. In the quiet embrace of dusk, Unity in Service prepared to step forth armed with faith in the shared stories, illuminating paths to justice, emboldened by those who dared to believe. Theirs was a promise kept under vast, understanding skies, a dedication as emboldening as the veterans once marched to war. As the world slept, they, alongside Elijah and Marcus, awakened to the dawn, chorusing their pursuit, a new dawn, unshackled, awaiting justice's myriad sonnets. In the warm glow of a late afternoon, the Johnson family gathered once more in the living room, which had become a hub of activity and support for the burgeoning change in Briarwood. The room vibrated with a renewed sense of purpose, edges softened by laughter and the gentle cadence of shared stories. The air was thick with the aroma of freshly baked bread, a sensory reminder of the home-cooked comfort that had always been the family's anchor through turbulent time. Today, they were joined by some of Elijah's fellow veterans, members of the nascent Unity in Service Coalition. Each face present bore the indelible mark of experience, tracing stories of both valor and silent battles waged beyond the field. They represented a spectrum of service, but more importantly, a commitment to crafting a future as resolute as any mission once undertaken in uniform. With the hum of anticipation, Elijah called the meeting to order, holding in his hand a worn notebook, its dog-eared pages a testament to the journey they were on. The coalition had grown from an idea into a living momentum, its existence a rally cry echoing across Briarwood with each gathering, each testament shared within the folds of vulnerability and strength. "Thank you all for being here," Elijah began, his voice tinged with gratitude and the seriousness that underscored their work. "We've done incredible things in a short amount of time, but today we need to decide how we're going to take the next step and reach the wider community." A grumble of agreement rolled through the room. Since the coalition's formation, they had focused on internal understanding, creating a safe space for veterans to articulate their experiences and learn from others. But now, the imperative was clear. It was time to bridge their burgeoning unity to those outside, engaging the entire community in their vision for lasting change. Marcus, sitting to Elijah's left, leaned forward with a sense of urgency. "We've talked about organizing a town-wide event," he proposed. "A day where we bring together all the voices, veterans, civilians, young and old, to celebrate unity and address the issues that need changing." The idea energized the room. Heads nodded, discussions flowed. It was a chance, they realized, to transform the narrative, using storytelling not as a device for division, but as a conduit for connection and understanding. "An event like that could really put us on the map for positive change," Mary chimed in from across the room, her enthusiasm infective. "And it could be a way to push back against those who cling to old biases." The potential of such an event, a day of reflection, appreciation, and dialogue, began to gain form, crafting itself into a possibility as tangible as the afternoon light streaming through the curtains. It was an opportunity rooted in the same spirit they had nourished, the valor of service, the courage to confront silence, and the resolve to rewrite a community's script. Among the veterans gathered, discussions grew animated, filled with ideas and anecdotes that resonated beyond individual experiences. They highlighted the stories that needed telling, narratives too often consigned to the shadows, now finally facing the light as part of a collective tapestry interwoven with resilience and empathy. Elijah listened, letting the voices of those around him mingle with his own hopes and aspirations. As the room filled with possibilities, he felt the weight of destiny, not as a burden, but as a tether tied not just to his legacy, but to a shared humanity birthed amidst conflict and discord. Leah, his mother, observed the exchanges with silent pride, recognizing in the diverse group a powerful dynamic reminiscent of her own generation's struggles, insistent, inexorable progression toward compassion, etched in steadfastness. Her heart swelled with appreciation for the courage to carve out a new legacy and the wisdom to do so inclusively. "They may not expect this from us," Marcus continued, a subtle defiance dancing in his tone. "But that's why it will work. We aren't what they expect. We're more." With the kernel of a vision planted, the group began to delve into logistics, strategizing the details of what the event would look like. A festival in truth, full of discussions, art, music, and storytelling that encompassed the rich variation within their lives. They talked well into the twilight, the shadows lengthening as words painted the room in hues of determined collaboration. In their visionary planning, they delineated paths forward, painting a broad canvas of inclusion and empowerment, brow brushstrokes against the muted backdrop of old misunderstandings. As the evening wore on, Elijah watched his friends and family transition their discussions to the warmth of communal meals and shared laughter, a tangible preview of the unity they aimed to cultivate. His heart thrummed with profound resolve. Their cause was more than a choice. It was a calling born from the persistence of a hopeful reality. The room buzzed with life as the conversations lingered longer, deepening and weaving networks beyond simple association. As plans firmed and hopes meshed with tangible action, Elijah felt the certainty that he stood on the precipice of a new dawn, one he could envision not just in imagined futures, but one visible in the faces gathered. A promise lay in this moment, a quiet benediction shared in conscious resolve, nurturing a potential of unfathomable depth, a bridge casting forward in surging arcs toward understanding and togetherness. Elijah knew their path would not be easy, but together their movement sang with the promise of strength unyielding, a resonance destined to reshape their town and create a narrative written in shared humanity, steadfast conviction, and enduring hope. The journey was in motion, a testament to lives embraced in unity, courageously illuminated and resonating through the still southern night. The energy from the Johnson family's planning meeting carried over into the subsequent days, transforming Briarwood's atmosphere into one of anticipation. Conversations about the upcoming event trickled into local coffee shops, echoed through school hallways, and found their way into dinner table discussions. Briarwood was abuzz, each corner humming with the promise of unity and the possibility of change. As the event drew near, Elijah found himself deeply absorbed in preparations. The coalition, a dynamic coalition of veterans and local activists, came together with a vibrant enthusiasm, their collective passion forging an indomitable spirit of collaboration. This wasn't merely a celebration, it was a statement, a visible testament to resilience, understanding, and the power of community cohesion. On the morning of the event, the town square erupted into a lively tableau of color and movement. Vendors' tents lined the streets, festooned with banners proclaiming messages of equality and solidarity. The scent of barbecued meats mingled with the sweet aroma of freshly baked goods, enticing wandering passers-by to indulge. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable optimism, a communal heartbeat aligning in shared purpose. Elijah wandered through the burgeoning crowd, shaking hands and exchanging words with familiar faces and new ones alike. Excitement contoured his path with scintillating arcs, the diverse assembly signifying hope, not just in the moment but in sustained effort, marching onward. Nearby, a stage had been erected, a focal point intended to amplify voices often relegated to whispers. Musicians tuned their instruments, their melodies imbuing the air with warmth and invoking the unity born of shared rhythms. Art stations invited attendees to paint, their vibrant creations reflecting the diversity and depth of Briarwood's intertwined cultures. Marcus, ever at Elijah's side, surveyed the scene with a growing sense of triumph. "This is what it's about, Eli," he remarked, his voice a blend of pride and determination. "Look at them. They can't ignore us anymore." Elijah nodded, his gaze sweeping across the throng, a tapestry featuring the elderly exchanging stories with the young, families reuniting, and strangers transformed into friends beneath the gentle sway of live harmonies. For the first time in a long time, Briarwood felt different. There was an intangible shift, a collective awareness finding form in a celebration rooted in authenticity. The main event, a series of storytelling sessions, drew a crowd eager to listen. Elijah took the stage alongside fellow veterans, each poised to recount narratives resonant with truth and perspective. The crowd's murmurs subsided into expectant silence, faces drawn with anticipation. Elijah spoke of journeys defined not by titles or medals won, but by the humbling strength forged from endurance, an ardent recollection of paths walked in the pursuit of justice, both tangible and elusive. Each word was accompanied by attentive nods, gestures of acknowledgement from an audience willing to understand and engage despite differing experiences. His words bled into stories volunteered by others, their voices resonating like chords striking through waters calm. yet reflecting new waves awakened. The narratives formed a mosaic, shared in candor and mirrored empathy, embodying the strand pulling together the diverse threads of their community's future. The tale-telling gave way to dialogue, a spontaneous discussion flourishing, addressing challenges and hopes conveyed with honesty, a testament binding generations. It was a discourse fusing differences into common goals, a thread not divided but woven through openness, channeling strength born from collective vulnerability. Amidst the proceedings, Elijah paused, watching from the sidelines as connections transcended familiar territories, eyes meeting eyes under different guises, now reflecting shared endeavor. He recognized this was no longer just an initiative driven by necessity. It had become a living testament to evolving understanding that people united against the despair of indifference. As dawn hours melded into twilight's embrace, the festival reached its zenith, gathering into what it strove to be a rallying call to action and unity, manifested through compassion and courage. Neighbors, once divided, coordinated their narratives amidst conversations open-ended yet firmly rooted in understanding soil. The event culminated in an unbidden chorus of song veterans, civilians, children, and elders, each harmonizing into a melody of belonging, reverberating through the town square like a heartbeat promising the fruition of shared dreams. Under starlit skies, the boundaries once defining friendships and conflicts faded into comforting resonance, the rhythm of community reborn. Through Elijah's eyes, Briarwood shone vibrantly, the path of resistance diminishing beneath shadows made fluid through light. Here, in this moment, laced with renewal and recognition, the groundwork of their shared journey coalesced into substantive strides toward inclusion. As the night drew to a close, Elijah recognized a resolution residing not just in hopes and aspirations, but realized within footsteps forward. A trajectory undaunted, alive in shared humanity, engendered by the stories they chose to craft and the legacies they dared to reshape. And so, the awakened breeze nudged the arcs toward tomorrow, inhaling possibility across the unfoldment of dawn, a clarion of change, whispering beneath grounded steps taken forward, together, with resolve, toward shared horizons, awaiting in tales unwritten. As dawn broke gently over Briarwood the day after the event, Officer Reynolds found himself standing at the edge of the town square, reflecting on the vibrant energy that had infused the town just hours before. The echoes of laughter and music still lingered in the air, weaving through the streets with a promising resilience. The event had been a testament to possibility, a glimpse of what unity and understanding could achieve, and it had affected him more deeply than he had anticipated. Reynolds stared at the remnants of the festival banners still fluttering in the breeze, colorful chalk art dancing across the pavement, portraying visions of equality and hope. In the quiet aftermath, he felt a sense of clarity that had eluded him for so long. Within him stirred a resolution, a desire not only to acknowledge his past mistakes, but to take tangible steps toward making amends and fostering trust within a community left frayed by misunderstanding. Returning to the precinct with a newfound purpose, Reynolds approached the police chief with a proposal, a program aimed not just at cultivating awareness within the force, but at forging stronger bonds between officers and the community. He envisioned workshops where officers could hear firsthand from residents about their experiences and concerns, turning faceless authority figures into neighbors and allies. The idea, though laden with potential controversy, was buoyed by the night's lingering momentum. The chief listened, arms crossed but expression thoughtful, the gravity of the city's tempo reflecting in his eyes. A silence extended before he spoke, fixing Reynolds with a penetrating gaze that seemed to measure the man's sincerity. "The times are changing, Reynolds," the chief acknowledged, his voice carrying an undercurrent of acceptance tempered by cautious optimism. "We've got to move with them, and if this is how we begin, then I'm willing to try it." With the chief's tentative approval, Reynolds felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with the first step laid firmly, hope began to blossom, where once it had withered beneath the watchful eyes of tradition. His proposal gave form to a promise, one that insisted upon transparency, equity, and active listening as cornerstones of rebuilding lost faith. Later, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Reynolds made his way to the Johnson home, his heart a study in both unspoken gratitude and apprehension. The memory of their last conversation lingered, its impact significant in ways he was just beginning to fully appreciate. Today, he hoped to share these tentative steps forward, offering what he could to heal what had been fractured. Elijah met him on the porch, welcoming him with a nod that spoke volumes. Quiet acceptance, a readiness to bridge divided spaces through purposeful action. "Reynolds," Elijah greeted, his voice steady. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again so soon." "Never simple, is it?" Reynolds replied, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "But I came to tell you what happened. We're starting something new at the precinct, thanks to you." As he laid out the proposal, Elijah listened intently, recognizing the depth of Reynolds' commitment to change. This was more than an idea. It exemplified a genuine desire to confront and dismantle entrenched biases that had long held sway, habits the officer now stood ready to see transform. Their conversation unfolded with candor, exploring how solidarity could plant seeds stronger than rejection, weaving a tapestry where community engagement rested not as rhetoric, but as resolute action underneath Briarwood's arching skies. With collaborations envisioned, Elijah held a glimmer of optimism in this evolving tapestry, woven with intersections and intentions converging toward the better. "It's the start that matters, Reynolds," Elijah encouraged, his voice lending strength to the vigil ignited by burgeoning opportunities. "Small steps, but critical ones. Together we reshape what we want Briarwood to be." The shadows lengthened as the evening drew near, their conversation extending into the early embrace of night. Where once stood divides, now emerged foundations of trust, shaped by every motion toward understanding and connected by resolve to uphold shared value. Elijah and Reynolds, standing side by side, each felt the bounds of division give way to the power of collaboration, illustrating more than just rhetoric, a path tread together, earnestly, under watchful constellations. These steps asserted a reality that through engaged partnerships, silence would no longer shield ignorance, nor would fear obscure opportunity. As their interaction concluded, Reynolds prepared to leave, buoyed by newfound purpose, a commitment not for forgiveness, but for rectitude, recognizing redemption as unceasingly dynamic. Elijah bid him farewell with the night's gentle promise stirring in his chest, aware that the journey of healing could not merely be a solitary march, but one undertaken through unity and fortitude. The town's energy shimmered on the cusp of renewal as night concealed the plans drawn toward dawn. Here, within Briarwood's confines, potential waited to unfold tightly within its fabric, a weave undone at times yet newly restored, ready to claim another day, hand in hand. Together, in rising bonds untethered by past limitations, uncertain tomorrows met Robin's boundless sky, a journey not solely of overcoming, but of reinvention, toward the echoes of eternity calling, both intimate and enduring, on pale, whispering winds above. As the dawnlight crept across Briarwood, painting the town in hues of gold and gentle rose, Elijah prepared himself for a moment he had anticipated since the festival, a public forum where he would share his story personally with the wider community. This time his platform was different, designed not for defense but for dialogue, a space inviting understanding rather than outrage. The venue was the restored old church, its walls steeped in collective memories of both challenge and triumph. Pews lined the aisle, gradually filling with townsfolk drawn by curiosity, empathy, or the simple desire for resolution. The stained glass windows, adorned with years of sunlight, lent a kaleidoscope of colors to faces both familiar and new to Elijah faces, reflecting the complexity of histories interwoven with hope. Elijah stood at the front, heart pulsing with a blend of trepidation and excitement. He hadn't anticipated such a turnout, a testament perhaps to Briarwood's readiness to embrace change, or the magnetic pull of a story that could no longer be ignored. Beyond the rows sat community leaders, elected officials, and those who shaped the town's rhythm. Among them, Officer Reynolds offered a nod of reassurance, a silent acknowledgement of a journey intertwined with reconciliation, watchful and resolutely sincere. As quiet settled, Elijah centered himself, drawing strength from the palpable support that surrounded him, an invisible tapestry of perseverance, spanning more than his lifetime alone. He tapped the microphone gently, its soft echo signaling the start. "Thank you all for being here," Elijah began, his voice steady, sinking into the stillness like a pebble causing ripples. "I stand before you not just as Elijah Johnson, a soldier, but as a member of our community yearning for connection and truth that unites, not divides." He paused, allowing his words to resonate, absorbing their weight with his audience. Each face, raptly attentive, awaited the revelations stitched within his narrative, not merely as testimony but as a sharing of spirit, interlinked and heart-centered. "That day I was stopped, I felt a biting injustice. One that I'd confronted before but never imagined I'd face at home," he continued, his words escaping like breaths long held within. "It felt like a battle, one I didn't expect, wearing neither armor nor uniform, just the skin I've always known." Across the room, heads nodded, some lowering in introspection, reflecting private moments of unspoken biases challenged, seeing in Elijah's plight echoes of their missteps and latent hurt. He spoke of service, juxtaposing the respect earned through valor abroad with the suspicion met upon return. His story, the fulcrum upon which the axis of their collective understanding might tilt toward a deeper empathy. It became clear his words were not an indictment, but an advocacy, a call to action sprouting from humanity rather than accusation. To truly support our veterans, our neighbors, we must look beyond uniform and complexion, seeing instead the stories, the lives, the legacy we all strive to cultivate, Elijah stated, clarity on every syllable cascading through the room, a quiet storm washing over assumptions. Applause followed, an outpouring amplified by the magnitude of truth taking flight. Creating symphony from silence witnessed, Elijah stood, momentarily unshaken by resonance unearthed, forged by a resolve akin to lines unbroken, voices rising chorally against indifference assumed by tradition. Elijah continued, sharing tales of hope and community resilience, how Briarwood could honor its past while authoring a more inclusive, impactful future, an anthology penned by individuals always ready to stand together tirelessly. "Healing isn't about forgetting," he emphasized, "but remembering in a way that transforms us, elevating us beyond fear of difference into celebration of uniqueness." As Elijah spoke, he glimpsed his family within the congregation, their faces proud, illuminated by the light streaming through stained glass, reflecting the bright colors of legacy redeemed through action, presenting possibility not just foreseen, but lived. His words wove compassion, challenging attendees to confront prejudices as brave as dismantling barriers, personal and communal. In the discourse's wake, wisdom whispered, expressed clearly amid hesitancies baited by courage untethered. The conclusion drew near, Elijah offering them an invitation rather than an ending, a mandate of open-hearted exploration transcending ego, where actions spoke the language of inclusion far beyond familiar refrains. "Let us lead not just with policy but with compassion," Elijah closed, turning the spotlight not only on himself but toward every person prepared to walk alongside toward shared redemption. "Together we create the Briarwood we dream of." The clapping ignited a spark of satisfaction, consent within harmony reborn, an anthem singing through unoccupied pews, basking in caressed sunlight. The forum marked not just awareness, but momentum, ushered unseen opportunities galvanizing ionized airwaves. Leaving the podium, Elijah felt the burden of shared dreams no longer his alone to shoulder, dispersed within narratives rekindled, seeds planted leading away from exclusionary contours and into unfolding ecologies yet explored. As he joined his family, Elijah savored the possibility dormant, thriving within twilight murmurs, commitments tangible. Here, set within realms unspoken, echoed songs built anew, and vision unfurled in destiny's clarion, unceasing and immeasurable by winds of lamented pasts. In the future's embrace, Briarwood paid heed to its tapestry unified part memoir, part prophecy, sustained in collective reawakening unfurling beneath the constellations, promising horizons expansive and untamed. In the aftermath of Elijah's moving testimonial, the echoes of his words lingered like a soft melody playing in the hearts of all who had attended. His call for compassion, understanding, and collective action resonated deeply, leaving an indelible mark on Briarwood that could not be easily dismissed. The impact of his story reverberated through the town, but it also ignited a broader conversation, drawing attention from neighboring communities and beyond. The growing momentum demanded accountability and change, pushing those in positions of power to examine their roles more closely. It wasn't long before the official investigation into the officer's actions concluded, catalyzing a series of decisions that would ripple through the police department and the community at large. The inquiry laid bare the undercurrents of systemic biases, highlighting not just individual shortcomings, but also the institutional flaws needing rectification. The verdict delivered was a turning point. Officer Callahan, whose actions embodied prejudiced assumptions, faced immediate termination. The findings necessitated a radical commitment to reform, authenticated by both necessity and justice long deferred. The outcome signaled a clear message. Biases once hidden beneath the veneer of authority would no longer be tolerated in silence. Officer Reynolds, however, found himself on a different path. His choice to confront his complicity and seek redemption was taken into account. The review panel acknowledged his efforts for genuine reconciliation with the community and his role in initiating new programs fostering openness and change. In the end, he was given the opportunity to continue serving, under strict oversight, with the caveat of demonstrating continuous growth and unwavering dedication to the community's well-being. For Briarwood, these consequences resonated beyond the boundaries of the department. They were a testament to the transformative power of truth, courage, and collective action. The decisions reached were not just a closure of one chapter, but the opening of another one, underscored by ongoing commitment to justice and equality. As Elijah stood at the heart of the town square, surrounded by friends, family, and townsfolk bound by the newfound spirit of unity, he saw in their faces the tangible effects of what they had accomplished together. It was a moment both humble and profound, shifting the fabric of the town toward inclusivity and hope. In the days following the verdict, the garden in the town square became a living memorial to the journey that they had undertaken. A plaque was installed, etched with words that reverberated the ethos of their collective struggle and aspirations. Justice sown, truth reaped, unity sustained. The space transformed into a place for reflection, a physical and metaphorical anchor, reminding them of the stories that brought them together, and the promise of a future emboldened by understanding. Elijah would walk through the garden often, finding solace and strength in its growing beauty, a testament to the perseverance that transformed pain into progress and sowed the seeds of healing into fertile grounds. It became a space where people gathered to engage in ongoing dialogue, ensuring the flame of change remained alight, nurtured by actions and intentions rooted in shared humanity. Meanwhile, the ties within unity and service solidified, as the group expanded to involve more voices across Briarwood. Their mission extended outward from its inception, providing resources, advocacy, and support networks not only for veterans, but for all seeking empowerment through unity. Through seminars, workshops, and community initiatives, they fostered an environment where stories previously untold found platforms to inspire and educate, impacting hearts and minds across demographics. Their journey showcased resilience woven into every narrative, glistening through unity curated through realignment of focus toward betterment, inclusion in its truest form. Elijah, serving as a guide yet refusing the mantle of savior, remained a constant with Marcus beside him. their partnership a beacon illuminating the path forward, unfaltering against adversity. As leaders of change, they understood that the battle against injustice was an ongoing endeavor, perpetuated not just by declarations, but by every small action taken toward dismantling the barriers of inequality. Together, they stood as symbols of the possibilities unique to a community that chose to address the marrow of its flaws with intention, as bold as the choices aligning within evolving destinies. Their lives intertwined with every voice, every hand reaching across barricades once believed insurmountable. And so, Briarwood became more than a backdrop. It evolved into the embodiment of a lesson learned and continually retaught, an affirmation that resonates with renewal thriving against history's reluctant to cede ground. Within this steadfast circle of progress, Elijah walked surrounded by living echoes, a reminder of the promises that necessitate constant tending, akin to a garden requiring sustenance by both sun and rain. The journey was ceaseless, yet it promised horizons brushed with morning splendor, opened unto possibilities unbridled by fear, but sown in the essence of discovery, found only within paths shared and reimagined with every step taken together. The reverberations of Briarwood's transformation extended far beyond its limits, capturing the attention of towns grappling with their own shadows of discrimination and disconnection. Elijah's story, woven into the fabric of the town's awakening, became a beacon, lighting the way for others seeking to navigate the labyrinth of systemic injustice. In neighboring communities, discussions were inspired by Briarwood's example, sparking initiatives designed to address entrenched biases and foster inclusivity. What had begun as a personal ordeal for one man now unfolded into a narrative of collective empowerment, echoing through school auditoriums, city councils, and local organizations determined to make tangible changes. Elijah found himself traveling beyond the familiar streets of Briarwood, invited to share his journey with others poised for transformation. At each stop, he encountered those whose lives mirrored his own, a tapestry of faces and stories resonant with shared experiences and renewed hope. These gatherings became sanctuaries for truth-telling, spaces where voices long subdued found the courage to resonate and inspire. In a town not dissimilar to Briarwood, Elijah sat in a community center, the room filled with educators, activists, and local leaders eager for insight and grounded narratives. As he spoke, the room wrapped in attentive silence, his words unfurled like tendrils reaching out to touch hearts tethered by similar struggles. The challenges we face require more than just acknowledgement, Elijah emphasized, the conviction in his voice echoing with the steadfastness of lived experience. They demand action, consistent, unwavering action, drawn from understanding rather than assumptions. The gathering responded with enthusiasm, each question posed an offering of vulnerability, each answer an opportunity to forge connections across invisible divides. Together, they explored how dialogue could dismantle long-held misconceptions, how storytelling might bridge disparate realities into cohesive understandings, transforming reflections into resolute expressions. Elijah often returned to Briarwood, where unity and service continued to thrive, a testament to the town's evolving spirit and the strength of collective dedication. The group's initiatives expanded, forming alliances not only with veterans but with organizations committed to inclusivity, justice, and equality in all facets of community life. The veterans who once saw themselves solely through the lens of past service now embraced broader advocacy roles, using insight and leadership to shepherd new generations toward participatory equity. They developed mentorship programs, provided educational resources, and perhaps most importantly, fostered spaces where open hearts and minds could converge safely and constructively. The ripple effects of Briarwood's journey manifested in tangible reformative action seen across sectors, implanted into policy changes, community projects, education reform, and law enforcement training. The ethos embodied by Elijah's narrative wove its power into systemic transformation. These changes didn't happen overnight, but with perseverance, They unfolded in a rhythm mirrored by those invested in understanding and progress. Back in Briarwood, the town garden stood as an emblem of the enduring possibility seeded through shared struggles, adopted as a symbol of communal efficacy and hope. Families returned to it time and again, leaving behind tokens and messages that reminded them of the path they had walked and the horizons they envisioned. Elijah often visited this garden during quiet moments, walking amongst the blooms, not merely as a citizen, but as a custodian of its legacy. He felt in its serenity the boundless potential of dreams tended with care, lives enriched through purposeful intersectionality. With each step, Elijah was aware of the continuity of narratives that had steered them, all those altered into triumph, aligned with every footprint reassuring permanence in endeavor. Here, the paths they had cultivated felt unmarred by fleeting discord, each bud bursting forth the promise yet realized. As evening often gathered its shades, coloring the town in gentle twilight, Elijah would pause, drawing peace from knowing their beginnings had sparked more than they had dared dream. It was the gift of returning to purpose, realized and embarked upon with others, drawn lovingly by renewal's call, a reminder that in togetherness, roads once clouded with doubt emerged clear and generous under naked skies. For Briarwood and all its inhabitants marching forward, the journey embraced an ongoing commitment, one strengthening roots through advocacy and embedding truth as a compass, guiding their pledge toward shared prosperity. In the reflection of evolving unity, they found not only fits of struggle, but joy in transformation, a rise to potential, inviting yet another generation from shadows toward light expansive. Elijah's heart, broad with hope, unyieldingly affirmed unity's promise, a legacy cradled willingly in endeavors crafting threads for tomorrows unforeseen, yet anticipated, with unfolding anticipation at every new dawn embraced. As stories continued to twist within winds, uncertain yet vibrantly bold, Briarwood and its rippling echoes became more than testament. It emerged as a refrain, rhythmic and resonant, celebrated in convergence, penned with letters eternal, and flourished beneath skies enchanted by shared devotion to healing embraced together. In the evolving landscape of Briarwood, the echoes of transformation continued to resonate profoundly. As spring breathed new life into the town, a collective spirit of renewal seemed to echo in every corner. Elijah watched the familiar scenes unfolding with a quiet satisfaction. The bonds formed in shared purpose had rooted deeply, promising a lasting commitment to the principles they had fought to establish. The collaboration between the police force and the community had reshaped relationships, creating a trust that once seemed unattainable. Officers, now more than ever allies, participated in community events, engaging with residents beyond the confines of duty, becoming true guardians and friends in the ongoing dialogue of equality and justice. On a particularly vibrant day, Elijah found himself standing in the town square amidst preparations for another community gathering, this time billed as a trust-building exercise, a tangible manifestation of unity born from past struggles. The square, abuzz with the sounds of preparation, mirrored the liveliness of a town no longer content to reside in stasis, but alive with the promise of a future defined by mutual respect. Beaming children played on the fringes, their laughter a testament to the safe environment fostered by efforts to ensure inclusivity and understanding reigned supreme. Families and friends converged, setting up stalls and booths adorned with colors vibrant and inviting, echoing the diversity that now thrived unencumbered beneath Briarwood's steadfast sun. As Elijah walked through the square, he marveled at the transformations. At every corner, he saw conversations unfolding, connections solidifying across previously uncharted territories. The air rang with snippets of dialogue painted with optimism, crafting a promise rooted not in rhetoric, but actualized through tangible action. Elijah moved with intent toward a familiar face, Antonia Morales, one of the leaders in Briarwood's Youth Council, a newly established group embodying the town's rejuvenated spirit. They greeted each other with smiles, acknowledging their shared commitment to guiding Briarwood's younger generation towards open-mindedness and equality. Elijah, Antonia began, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "This is incredible. Look at what we've accomplished. It's inspiring." He nodded, gratitude playing upon his features, perceiving in Antonia's eyes a future that burned brightly with potential. The Youth Council, composed of students and young leaders from across the community, had grown exponentially, serving as a potent symbol of Briarwood's metamorphosis, its very existence a bold declaration of the town's dedication to sustained progress. Antonia continued, "We've organized workshops for this week, exploring identity and diversity. Kids teaching kids, you know?" Her passion underscored each word, her gaze scanning the bustling crowd eagerly. "That's perfect, Antonia. You're shaping tomorrow, leading the way with a heart right and full," Elijah replied, proud to play a part in nurturing the enthusiasm that ferociously embraced change and avidly denounced stagnation. Beneath the sun's glow, Elijah recognized the boundless joy in this renewal, the sheer magnitude of trusting each voice and respecting each narrative spun for community prosperity. It was as if Briarwood itself had been transformed into a canvas, a masterpiece of cooperation and hope restored. As the day unfolded, Officer Reynolds made his appearance at the community assembly, greeted with warmth and acceptance. A further stroke colored upon the transcript of trust. What commenced with doubt and separation had unequivocally pivoted to form a tapestry infused with respect and transparency. Together, and through listening, proactive steps replaced hollow pledges, establishing peace as the common thread uniting all who called Briarwood home. Standing beside Columbus, Elijah acknowledged the discovery that resilience breathed as much life into foundations previously disillusioned, propelling faith into earnest promises refueled by inherent worth, the infinite reclamation of spaces aligned under unequivocal justice. As evening draped its gentle calm over Briarwood, the square danced under lanterns, swinging tender against plum-tinged ether music, and laughter resonated upward, cascading within. The town, once aching from its past, now thrived into palpable solidarity. Each footfall a boastful expression of forceful evolution and earnest reciprocity. Elijah surveyed the scene with satisfaction, gracing every inhale, a fitting culmination of what trust empowered, assuring silent defenses no longer scripted in glacial origins. Here, among friendship and warmth, residents found solace seamlessly entwined with aspiration, balancing the societal ledger once tipped, never lessened by circumstance, disarmed. As he pondered the path traversed, Elijah understood this narrative was but one chapter in an anthology continually unfolding. Unity in service ensured this legacy flourished, dynamic and eternal. The journey was perpetual yet achievable, reminiscent of rebirth, sung true in harmony, a promise, binding generations unseen to the kiln, recast by resilience. Embraced within, starlight warm and tiresome breeze hushed, Briarwood's chorus pre-dawn sang openly within lingering enlightenment. With sombreros risen upon rebirth solemnity shared, Elijah Johnson, steward of ties unwound and renewed, anticipated the sunrise's golden harbinger, casting light eternal across newly penciled dawn a dawn, forged by friendship flaming, truth's endless consortium. As the sun rose over Briarwood, its light spilled gently into Elijah's living room, painting it with the warm hues of morning. It was a day like any other, yet weighted with the satisfying conclusion of a formidable journey. The town's transformation was palpable, a testament to resilience, persistent dialogue, and the courage to rewrite a narrative long held captive by history. Elijah sat with a quiet peace, the kind of serenity that emerges from battles fought, both visible and invisible, and victories attained. He looked around the room, capturing the essence of reminders captured in family photographs, and shelved mementos that bore witness to moments spent balancing between struggle and reconciliation. As he sipped his coffee, the familiar hum of the community awakening around him filled the air. It was an ordinary sound, yet one that now carried the harmonic undertones of unity, a melody crafted by the symphony of voices once fractured, now resonant in harmony about shared futures unfolding. The door opened to reveal Marcus, his steadfast friend, carrying the morning paper whose headline bore the reflection of their communal efforts. From divided past to united future, Briarwood sets a new standard. The article recounted the remarkable transformation, illustrating the power of community-driven action and the journey from division to reconciliation. "Can you believe it?" Marcus asked, setting the paper on the table and casting Elijah a knowing smile, a camaraderie conveyed in its quiet nonchalance. Elijah nodded thoughtfully, feeling the fullness of their efforts resonating within him. It was a reminder that change, once deemed elusive, had become reality crafted not solely by the individual endeavor, but by the force of collective determination, an indomitable spirit uniting under shared objectives and empathetic understanding. "It's more than a headline," Elijah replied, gazing out over the town he called home. "We've rewritten the story, Marcus. Together." He reflected on the days and nights spent weaving their narrative, a tapestry colored by compassion, unfurled across moments testing resolve, yet met with collaborative resolution. Their friendship had been a constant, a thread of companionship weaving through their steadfast pursuit of equitable justice and a legacy rooted in inclusion. As they settled into conversation about future plans for unity and service, a new generation of leaders poised to step forward. Their focus was not just on celebrating accomplishments, but ensuring the continuity of the journey. Youth councils, mentorship programs, and partnerships with educational institutions had all found firm footing, an enduring commitment to steward learning and empowerment across each of Briarwood's ears. With the sun climbing higher, casting a golden radiance upon the town, Elijah knew that while their narrative was far from over, it now lay within capable hands, individuals and groups driven by purpose, awakening to their roles as storytellers and torchbearers, kindling the flame of change across generations. By the end of the day, as the evening drew close, and Briarwood once again gathered under the comforting embrace of twilight, Elijah stood at the heart of the town's garden, its pathways, intertwined with the shared history of loss and reconciliation, repurposed into paths forward. Beneath the starlight, Elijah found solace amidst the whispers of leaves swaying upon the breeze, acknowledging that their story had taken root, flourished beyond their wildest dreams, promising an enduring legacy realized not just within Briarwood's borders, but echoed into eternity's valleys. The tranquil moment was punctuated by the arrival of friends and family, their presence a cherished reminder of what they had collectively achieved, a legacy resulting, through dedication, alongside those whose names, like his own, carried the weight of shared progress. With gratitude etched upon each breath, Elijah turned toward the horizon, heart lifted by a promise scaffolded through devoted collaboration, a perpetual cadence, mirroring eternity's clockwork, joining voices delivered henceforth into illuminated dawn. Poised with gratitude and aspiring spirit, a gentle resolve filled him with enchainable reconciliation, casting placid dreams within inscribed notes, singing rhythms encompassing a world memorized by hope, intertwined with truth. Times may change, battles may rear, yet Briarwood's story, stitched within strands reborn, lingered, echoing abidingly promises, transforming undreamed boundaries into brilliance under stars endless. And so, the town embraced the night, as Elijah whispered a hope harbored through vision clear. Legacy isn't in our singular tale, but in the lives we touch while creating it. A question of conscious reflection lingered softly in his mind. How will we ensure this legacy continues? Let us foster courage, foster commitment, and pledge to uphold the dignity of shared humanity. Would you join us in celebrating this vision, in sharing this path toward unity and change? If you feel moved by this story, share its light, help pen its next chapter, and subscribe to our shared journey.